watching closely.
What's the secret, Max?
You just gotta find something you love to do and then do it for the rest of your life.
I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Establishing Shot podcast, a podcast where we do deep dives into directors and their filmographies. We are on episode 20, made it to the big 2-0 today, and we are kind of in the middle of Christopher Nolan series, and it's exciting. Today we get to jump into the first of really the trilogy that put Christopher Nolan's name in the households of America, and that's Batman Begins. So I'm excited to jump into this. I've got a new guest on today, Drew Feltz, coming to us from Statesboro, Georgia. Drew, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Eli. Glad to be here.
Absolutely.
Always happy to talk about Christopher Nolan. Always happy to talk about Batman. Like, I love both of those things deeply.
Yes. Yeah, I got the Batman shirt on today. It's kind of hard to see because it's one of those dark shirts. But Drew, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who you are, what you do, and then if you want to tell us kind of how you got into movies, what you like about movies, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So my name's Drew, and I think I have loved movies and television and visual medium of any kind, honestly, from a very young age. Just growing up and watching TV, going to the movies with my family and everything, and whether it was sitting in front of the TV with my brothers watching like Star Wars on like an old VHS back in the day, or going and seeing movies with my parents and friends when I got older. Just always been a big fan. Even me and my wife, when we first started dating, like that was the thing we did. We went and saw movies. I look back now and I think, how in the world did we afford to do that? Because we would go see like, one or two movies a week, and just loved it there for a season. And but yeah, man, I'm a pastor, primarily working with college students in Statesboro, Georgia. We have a big college town here with Georgia Southern University. Go Eagles! And man, it's just really love a good story in any form. I'm a big reader as well, and love comic books as well. So it's just been natural, and particularly Batman has always been one of my favorite superheroes. I'm a DC guy in general. I have nothing against Marvel per se, but I tend to think DC has better stories. And I think you and me, we've had that conversation before. I have no doubt. And and going back to Nolan, particularly the Batman Begins, what we're talking about today, was the first film I saw of him. I had heard of him in Memento and some stuff like that, and but I just heard there was a new Batman movie coming out, and I wanted to go see it, and so that began a beautiful, beautiful relationship, to the point that I would probably say now that Nolan's probably my favorite director. Like, I've not even seen Oppenheimer yet, but he's directed it, and like, if you would have told me that movie just on paper, I would have been like, whatever. But since he's directing it, I'll go see it. And like, I mean, pretty much every movie he's made, he has such a clear vision for all of his films, and such a focused kind of idea that it just translates to no matter what genre or what story he's telling. It's just excellent. So Batman Begins, where that really began, which is funny. Begins. Yeah. But that's where it's at. So that was my first Nolan film. I love it. Love the guy to death.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm fairly certain. My memory is a little fuzzy. I kind of shared about it on the first episode in the series, but yeah, I'm pretty sure Batman Begins was my first Nolan too. Just kind of the nature of like the age I was, so I wouldn't have been really like aware of maybe his. I wasn't like super into film at the time. I would think I was in middle school when Batman Begins came out. maybe late middle school, early high school, somewhere in
I,
there.
I have a
So
very distinct memory of seeing The Dark Knight in theaters when I was in
yeah,
college.
yeah.
Um, and so that's like one of my, probably like, if you're talking about best cinematic experiences ever, was opening
Hmm.
weekend. I was working a summer camp, traveling when I was in college called Centricate, and we all went, the whole staff went and watched a packed out theater,
Yeah,
seeing The Dark Knight. And so like that's like instilled, but I do remember seeing Batman Begins in theater too.
yeah.
Uh, and I guess I just looked it up. It was '05 it came out, and I
Hmm.
guess I was a junior in high school, and so
Yeah.
I'm pretty vivid remembers like memories going the Friday night to our little theater in our little town in South Georgia and seeing it and just walking away being like that was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think I watched it in theaters. I think I caught it on DVD later. But yeah, I think I was '05. If it came out in the summer, it would have been like before my freshman year of high school, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense. And I mean like the ripe age to watch a PG-13 Batman movie, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
uh so yeah, it really like we'll get into it, but yeah, it really is incredible that like Nolan is like firing on all cylinders with this movie so early in his career. But yeah, um yeah, his last film was his first like studio film, which was Insomnia.
Yes.
He which was I feel like is a pretty underrated movie, or at least like underknown. Like not a lot of people have seen it, I feel like. But really good, Al Pacino and Robin Williams, and I'm forgetting somebody, but yeah, really fantastic cast. His first like big studio movie, and then that was with Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And so he finished that, and he had started writing. He was actually writing a Howard Hughes like biopic
Mm.
film. And like so he's like, I think in something I read, he was like almost finished with that script, and then the Scorsese movie The Aviator got announced and was like in production, and he was like, well, crap, I guess. I
It's
guess
good
I'm
to know
not
that
doing
that
that.
happens to famous people as well as the rest of us who
Yeah.
plan and work and is like, well, crap.
Yeah. Well, there goes all that work.
Yep.
I've heard interviews of him like more recently where people will bring that back up, like, "Hey, you still got that Howard Hughes script?" And he was like, "Yeah, I still got it. Maybe one day I'll revisit it," sort of thing. But yeah, that's just funny.
When I
But
saw
like, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say I saw that because I was unaware of that until I saw your notes on that, so I looked that up, and it definitely seems like I wonder, you don't know for sure, but it
Yeah.
definitely makes a lot of sense why the direction Batman Begins and some of the characters in that ended up going. You wonder
Mm-hmm.
how much that played into who Bruce Wayne was, and
Right. Yeah.
some of these other characters. It's just there's definitely something about that that's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah, I was even just about to say like it when you watch Batman Begins, like knowing that you kind of see like, oh, like it seems like maybe a lot of that work he had put into that Howard Hughes, like kind of young, eccentric guy that loses his parents, has all this like these companies and all this money, and like trying to figure
Yeah.
out like what he's gonna do with his life. Yeah, you get a lot of that in Bruce Wayne in this movie.
Well, and I think that Batman Begins is one of these films that some films get better the older they get, and some get worse, I think. But
Mhm.
I find that originally, if you would have asked me, when the trilogy wrapped up, out of the three, what was my favorite? I probably would have told you The Dark Knight. And I think that The Dark Knight, which I'm sure you're going to talk about at length at some point in the future, is
Mhm.
probably overall the better film. But I will say that I think Batman Begins has become better with age.
Yeah.
Even just reading up and thinking through and kind of watching it to get prepped for this.
Mhm.
I'm amazed how much this movie is about Bruce Wayne before Batman,
Mm-hmm.
and how much that makes the movie and all the other movies that are to come in this trilogy better because of the foundational groundwork and character development he works in. It's just so
Yeah.
good and so grounded.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, like in retrospect, like watching through the trilogy, like in retrospect, the other two make Batman Begins better,
Yeah,
kind
I
of in
agree.
a reverse way too. Just because of that foundational nature of it, and just like it was a like it's kind of like the scale gets bigger each film, and this one was like very personal and like very honed in on Bruce becoming Batman sort of thing. Uh, yeah, yeah, I agree. I think it does get better. My wife watched a lot of it with me. She actually like watched a good chunk of it with me while I was watching it and taking notes, and then like she had to go do something else, and the next day she was like, "Hey, do you mind if I finish watching Batman
Yeah,
Begins?" I was
yeah.
like, "Yeah." But she was like, "Yeah, that's my. I think Batman." She was basically saying the same thing. Like, I think Batman Begins is my favorite, even though like The Dark Knight is so good. She was like, "I think that one's my favorite," which
Well, there's
I get it. You know?
yeah, there's something about and Nolan is I think it's the film is so focused
Mm-hmm.
um that you really you really understand Bruce Wayne
Yeah.
by the time that he actually puts on a cape and a cowl and becomes a guy running around a city as a vigilante. Because, like, the premise, and like, if I go up to anybody on the streets and explain this without the context of Batman, they're like, that sounds weird. Why would anyone do that kind of
Yeah.
thing? But, like, Nolan masterfully takes this and builds up so much where by the time that he's there, you're like, oh my goodness, I understand.
Yeah.
This person makes sense, and I'm rooting for him. It's like this is jumping ahead a little bit, but that scene where like the first scene when you see him as a Batman, where he's doing the whole typical thing you see in comic books and a million other versions of the Batman myth of him taking out like 20 guys by
Oh
himself.
yeah.
I think by the time he does that and he says, "Who are you?" He's like, "Batman." It's like by the time that, I mean, like you're like cheering, right? Because like it's
Yeah.
just been building up to that point so much, and man, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just so good.
Yeah, and that's like almost halfway through the movie, I think. Like
Yeah, yeah.
you're
Well, and
I
going
think it's
back
been
to
at least like an hour at that
yeah,
point.
I looked that up because that's what I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
My memory thinks that it's like a typical movie, and I think that's what stands this movie, particularly against all the other Batman movies there've been, because
Hmm.
there have been a lot of different versions of this myth, you could say, but like, man, it's I think an hour before you see Bruce Wayne as Batman.
Yeah.
And by that, and like that is wild. Like if you pitch that to somebody, you explain that to me, I'd say you're going to take an hour to explain a character. I would tell you that's stupid. Why are you doing that? Like you're wasting
Yeah.
time. But when Nolan does it, I'm enthralled and just there, and I'm just like, oh my goodness. By the time
Yeah.
he is Batman, I'm like,
You're all
yes,
in.
yes,
Yeah, it's funny because I rewatched the '89 Batman, Tim Burton's with Michael
yeah,
Keaton the other day, and because it had been so long since I'd seen it, and I was like, I'm about to do 3 Batman movies, like I gotta rewatch the '89
yeah,
Batman, and so I rewatched it, and it's like pretty much right off the bat, like Keaton swooping in as Batman, and it had been so long since I'd seen that, and I had just watched Batman Begins, and so like just like entranced by what Nolan did with that first like hour building the character. I was kind of surprised, like, oh wait, Batman's already here.
yeah,
But yeah, it really is crazy, and Nolan really like had that vision early on. Like he really gave Warner Brothers like a very simple pitch, which was basically like, I want to like re like basically like begin Batman again, like start from the beginning and ground him in reality. And that was
yeah,
kind of like his pitch to WB. It was like I think there's I don't know how much truth there is to it, but I think like it was basically like a 10-minute pitch. Like,
Yeah, I read the same thing. There was like a 15-minute pitch, and
Yeah.
but he walked away, and they gave it to him, which is
Right.
insane because he's a young guy at this point, and he's
Mhm.
only got a few films. They've all made money, obviously.
Right.
But his budget for this film, I think, was like 150 million or something.
150,
And that
yeah.
was like 5 times, if I remember right, what his budget what had been for any of the other films beforehand. So I mean, like, Warner Brothers.
Yeah, it's like triple kind of. I
Yeah.
think Insomnia was like 40.
Okay,
think
I
he
was
had-
thinking it was
I think-
somewhere in 30.
Yeah, he had 40. He went from basically no budget to like 4.5 million to 40 million, and then to 150 million. So
Yeah.
like, kind of like a step up, but 150 is a lot.
Yeah, well, and particularly when it's you're still kind of new, and it's the combination of all these things, right? Like one
Yeah.
of them by themselves is not that odd, but the fact if you're telling me if it is true, he gave a 10-15 minute pitch of
Yeah.
a very clear version of Batman that's very focused, but
Mhm.
extremely different from anything we've seen, from Michael Keaton's Batman to all the Batman. Batman Forever and Batman and Robin and all of that, which
Yeah.
you go back and read. I was reading about some of that stuff about how much they were trying to do the Star Wars thing with like basically marketing toys and really aiming at
Yeah.
kids, which again, there's nothing wrong with that, but like it was such a money grab in some ways. And so,
Yeah.
it turned Batman from this grounded detective vigilante who could exist in our world to a fantastical cartoon character. And if
Yeah.
you'd read the comics and stuff, there's a depth there that can be achieved.
Mhm.
And obviously Nolan picked up on that to some degree, that there was something here. And I don't know what he did, but
Yeah.
I can't have a 15-minute conversation and get somebody to convince me to give me that much money. But Christopher Nolan
Yes.
can. I mean, I have no, it's like going back. You tell me somebody does an hour intro, I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, why? But Nolan does it. It's brilliant. Same thing here. Like 15 minutes
For
from Nolan,
sure.
I imagine, is better than me talking for 5 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny especially because they actually had been trying to get Batman back off the ground for a while. Because you're coming off of movies like the Blade trilogy, X-Men had kicked off, Spider-Man had kicked off to great success, and so WB's like just sitting on Batman. They had pitches for like a Batman Beyond movie.
I would have loved to see that. Just complete side note.
Yeah.
I love Batman Beyond.
Batman
anime.
Beyond
I
is
think it's one of
awesome.
the best. Like, so good.
Yeah, the animated series. I think there's an animated feature-length movie too that I have not seen, but
I feel like I've seen it, but it was been a long
yeah.
time ago.
Yeah, and then one of the crazy pitches that I read about was from Darren Aronofsky. Like, had pitched a very like Batman Year One, which is a story arc. That would have been great. I don't know. I've heard some strange things about what he was going to do with that movie, and Aronofsky makes strange movies.
He does.
So
And
yeah,
Year
I don't
One-
know.
Yeah, Year One story arc's really fascinating. Like the comics and that kind of it's
Yeah.
great. But
Well, there's definitely like the middle section of this movie very much feels like that Year One kind of story
Yes.
arc.
it's
So,
it's definitely got some flavor of that in there.
yeah, it's crazy. There was also like a Batman and Superman pitch, which sounded, I can't remember what comic story arc it was, but it sounded like one of them, which is like, Joker kidnaps Lois Lane and kills her or something, and you got Superman and Batman kind of like at odds in some way. I can't remember what story arc that sounds like, but I definitely
Well, and there's been
read
there's
something
been
like
so
that
many
before.
of those written in the comics, and then so many different versions done in different
Right.
ways. Like even what you're saying about like Lois Lane, that sounds like Injustice, which was the fighting
that's-
video game, and that was like
Yeah.
literally, if whatever storyline that is, that's what they ran with that, and how
Mhm.
that kind of toppled over. But
Yeah.
there's, and Batman's so interesting because you even go back to like way back in the TV Batman, with like the the shark repellent and all that silly stuff. It's
Yeah.
like I have a I know you have some young kids. I have a young kid too, and one of the things we've started doing is we've started playing these Lego games together.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a Lego Batman game we have, and it's great. But the funny thing about it is there's like dozens of versions of Batman and Robin from all these things, from the goofy where like when you hit it's like going pow and bang,
Yeah.
to like, I'm Batman kind of thing, and everything
Yeah.
in between. So it's
Oh, yeah.
wild. I was even thinking about this before we got on here. Eli was like, I don't know many other characters that have had such a wide variety of interpretations of the character,
Mm-hmm.
and especially have such a wide variety that some of them actually worked even though they're vastly different.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of comic books. Like, that's one thing that, like, I don't know, like, one thing I don't understand about, like, how angry comic book internet people can be. Like, oh, you're ruining this character with your movie and the way you're doing it in your movie. And I just, like, want to shake them and be like, this is what comic books are about, reinventing characters and doing different things with them. Like, that's what has been happening throughout the history of comic books. You take a character, you take the general aspects of them and reinvent them with new stories. Like, that's how they're used. So that's just always been a pet peeve of people being like, oh, that's not how it happened, like, in the comics. And I'm like, which comics? Like, there's so
Yeah,
like,
you
what are you talking
can't say
about?
that's not how it happened in the comics, because like Batman alone has traveled through time and
Yeah.
done crazy stuff all over the place. So like you can't
Oh,
just
yeah.
say this story arc.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that, man. And if you think about it, that's what stories are in general too. This is getting a little
Mhm.
deeper than just this movie, but movies in general. Like what we're storytellers. Like stories resonate with us, and we've been retelling stories. And if you study story for any length of time, you'll find out very quickly that there's nothing new. It's just reworking things.
Yeah.
And I think focus back into Batman Begins. I think what Nolan was able to do with this, and one of the reasons Nolan's my favorite director, and I'll watch anything he has, is because he is able to put his own very creative, brilliant mind into an extremely focused place that when he goes in as a director, he knows what the outcome he wants it to be in any of his films. And it's always a unique perspective, even if it's a story that's been told. You're going to get a interpretation of it that's going to be unlike anything else you've seen. It may have hints of things. This is still a Batman movie, right? And the trilogy is still Batman, still the characters we know, but the way they're interpreted, the way they're laid out is completely different. And there was something about how realistic it is, going back to that pitch, that made this so refreshing. And I think some of it may have been built up off of the Spider-Man movies that had come out, who kind of leaned into that a little bit, but this was a whole nother step further. The example I think of the most is the Batmobile, right? Like the Batmobile has been all these crazy things, but in this one, it's a tank that can jump rivers, right? And like at first, I was really put back about that. Like I remember thinking that I was like, this isn't what the Batmobile is. I was one of those angry comic book guys you were talking about a second ago. At least in my mind, I have this emotional attachment to the animated series Batman Batmobile. And like, that's not a Batmobile, but when you see it in the context of the film, you're like, it couldn't have been anything else, because that's the vision he has. And because of that, it works so well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and he's at, like, one of the things he really like focuses on is like his script writing. And I think that plays a lot into it. He's very like, when he's, from what the research I've done so far, like at this point in his career, like when he gets going on a script, like he really like works through all the details. And I remember talking in the Memento episode about how in an interview he said that like the humanity of the character like really came out when Guy Pearce stepped in and like brought that aspect to it, but he wasn't writing it in that way. He writes very much in like, what's the puzzle? It's very like logically like laid out, everything fits together, and you can see that here. But I do think like he was wise. He brought in David Goyer to co-write this with him. Goyer's probably most well known for the Blade trilogy, which I haven't seen
Yeah.
any of those. Have you seen the Blade
I've
movies?
not either, but that makes a lot of sense because I
Yeah.
feel like the Blade trilogy, and I've never seen any of them, but everything I've seen about them, like clips and kind of read and understand about it, tonally, there's definitely something that it was ahead of the curve in some ways of superhero
Hmm.
movies, of having that kind of dark, realistic. There's something
Yeah.
more here, even though it's very fantastical at the same time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's vampires, but still.
Yeah, yeah,
uh, yeah. I mean, Goyer. Yeah, he brought him on probably partly because of that, and also just because Goyer knows comic books,
yeah.
and Nolan, very like admittedly did not. Like was not like well versed. Like knew the Batman character, was a fan of the Batman character, but and obviously like was attracted to the story. He's actually the one that brought it up to WB. They were like talking to him about some other stuff, and he was like, well, what about Batman? And but yeah, so obviously interested in it, but needed some help, and brought Goyer on. I thought one of the special features was an interview with Goyer, and he was talking about how he had gone to the comic book store that he frequents, and like started buying all these Batman graphic novels, and the guy that works at the counter was kind of like, what's going on here? Something's going on. And he was like, no, nothing's going on, just buying some buying some graphic novels. The guy's like, no, something's going on here. And after like a couple of trips, he was like, you're writing a new Batman movie, aren't you?
That's great. I
and
love
and he
that.
was like, no way. And so like that guy probably felt very vindicated later when he when he found out that this movie was coming out.
I read something similar to what you said too about WB mentioned something about Nolan doing this film, and somebody who knew Christopher at first was like, I don't think he would. He knows nothing about that.
Yeah.
Like, will he be interested? But I do think what you and this is something about Batman particularly that I think is something when it comes to superhero movies that resonates. Like that character and his story arc, man, there's something to that everyone can see is unique, and there's such an interesting story character to be there that even people who don't know everything about it like some geeks do are
Mhm.
still intrigued by it.
Yeah, for sure. And part of the reason I think why it's so it all fits together so well, it's such a complete vision, is because of the way he wrote it. So he wrote, him and Goyer actually like wrote in their garage, in Nolan's garage, and got the washing machine going, and they're like coming up with Batman ideas, and they brought in his production designer Nathan Crowley too. So they were kind of working all in tandem, the two writers and the production designer, and it was really smart because one of the reasons Nolan brought in Crowley, to like work on production design stuff as they were writing, is so that he could bring Warner Brothers like a complete vision,
Yeah.
which is smart already, but also like even smarter because he had the foresight to know this is this is like a very popular franchise. They're gonna have things they want me to do, and if I already bring them complete ideas, then it'll be harder for them to tell me like, you have to make the bat suit this way, you have to make the 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 Batmobile this way, because he's like coming to them with a complete idea, both story wise and like the design of everything. So I thought that was like super like smart and insightful of him to like have the wherewithal to think that through and like know like, well, if I want to do it the way I want to do it, I need to bring them everything. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and even I see you have in notes here too, talking about them like just sitting in a garage, like
Mm-hmm.
mothballing this and figuring it all out. And like it's I read about this as well that the W execs actually came to his garage to like read the
Right.
script with him and
Yeah.
like have this kind of vision casting thing. And I think like that again is one of those things that amazes me. But I think obviously Nolan has a way of being able to tell stories
Mm-hmm.
and get people on board with his vision. And if the vision that he was producing and casting for them obviously was very attractive and was very focused down to everything like small details that we may even be overlooking, but he did not, and those details really add up to make something special.
Yeah. Yeah, they did come to his garage. I was reading part of it is because they had the part of the reason they were willing to come to him to read the script and everything is because they had a big leaking scripts problem at WB apparently, and so they were like, well, if we go to this guy, and Nolan's like well known for being very like secretive with his scripts. I shared a story in the first episode. I'll share it again here because it's so good. So Nolan, when they have the script done, they call it the intimidation game. Not for any other reason other than like they're trying to be secretive with what they're writing. So like if people are seeing it, they're like, oh, the intimidation game. I wonder what that is. If they write like Batman Begins, and people are like, oh, it's a Batman movie.
Sure.
So like it's already like secretive in the script name. But so the story goes that they're getting into casting. He has his budget, and he shows up at Michael Caine's door, wants Michael Caine to play Alfred, and knocks on the door. Michael Caine doesn't realize it's Christopher Nolan at first. He thinks, it's just a guy dropping off the script. So he's like,
Sure.
I have this script. I want you to read it and let me know what you think. And Michael Caine's like, oh yeah, he's pretty accomplished at this point. He's like, oh yeah,
Sure.
I'll read it and get back to you. And he's like, no, I have to leave with this. He's like, I need you to read it right now. and it clicks with Caine that this is the director. This is Christopher Nolan. And so the story goes that Michael Caine invites him in and reads the script while Christopher Nolan sits there and reads tea in his living room. And then
it's gonna be a little intimidating at the same time, right? Even for him.
Yeah, and then leaves, takes the script with him. Yeah, I mean the rest is history after that, because Michael Caine is the Christopher Nolan guy. He's in every movie since, in some capacity or another.
He's such a good Alfred too. I mean, he's so That's all another conversation. How good Nolan is at casting people for characters and understanding them. But yeah, I know that's a great story though, man.
Yeah,
but also
really
to show
funny.
how. Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah. We always think you would know people no matter what when you meet them and come up to them, and then situations happen and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I just love that story. But yeah, Nolan talks about how really at the end of the day he was just kind of excited to make the kind of movie he would have loved as a kid.
Yeah.
And really put a lot of his childhood loves from film into this. So he's pretty well known for loving the movie Blade Runner, Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, and so he put a lot of that into this film. He said just kind of those city streets, kind of bustling with grime and that sort of thing. That's definitely in there.
Yeah, 100%.
You have he talks about the Count of Monte Cristo being an influence for the beginning, which in the Count of Monte Cristo, he's kind of it's kind of that situation where he's in prison to kind of get an ends, it kind of a rich guy getting in the grime. Sort of thing.
It's been a long time since I've watched that, but
same.
Yeah, they definitely. Yeah, I see that now that you're saying that.
Yeah, and then one of the things that I like is Nolan is known for loving the Bond movies too, and he does put some of that in here. So he talks about he talks about how in the past Gotham has always been so self-contained. And he really wanted it to feel like it was set in the real world. And so he starts off with this very global footprint kind of thing. You have Bruce in Africa, you have him in somewhere in Asia, all before you ever see him set foot in Gotham.
And that's a valid point too, because I feel like we don't
Yeah.
see, and I mean, there probably are some shots of Gotham that are a bit more, like your typical Batman movie shots of Gotham, but we don't really see Gotham besides these very dark, gritty kind of glimpses of how good people get chewed up and spit out, and everyone's just kind of struggling or either
Yeah.
corrupt and manipulating, uh,
hmm
until and then you go out to the world, you see there's still some of that there too, and then come back, but it's obvious Gotham is this dark place kind of
Yeah.
thing that is
Oh yeah.
that is grimy and kind of what you're talking about Blade Runner, just run down.
Yeah, you have like the Blade Runner influence, but also have you ever seen any Fritz Lang, like the old M or Metropolis, really
I
old like
have.
20s and 30s films? So I haven't seen M. That was kind of influence on the look, but Metropolis I've seen. It's a very like kind of futurescape kind of city kind of
Yeah, I
look.
see this. I'm looking up some of the
Um,
screenshots. I definitely see this influence in it.
yeah, and then the other one that I thought was really cool, is this guy Giovanni Battista Piranesi. He's a Venetian engraver and like etcher, from the I want to say the 18th century.
Okay.
And he had this series of etchings called, I mean, it was in Italian, but in English, it's Imaginary Prisons. And I'm going to hold this up to the screen so you can see it. But it's these like really like intense like etchings of these prisons with like pulleys and stairs and ladders kind of going everywhere. Kind of like, it even kind of has the feel of like a, those Escher drawings of like the stairs that lead to nowhere kind of thing. There's
Yeah.
just like, and it feels like it's endless. Like you look at the picture, and even though it's like self-contained, it feels kind of like it's this endless like maze of
Yeah.
prison.
It's almost
And
got that mythic level of like almost like a labyrinth,
yeah,
like fantastical. Like this is a. I'm looking at these. I just googled them, man. These are wild.
yeah, they're
There's
crazy
this
looking.
there's this one that looks like what you were just saying, like the stairs that are going nowhere. Almost, it's
Yeah.
like verging right there. Like it's very. You look at it. If you glance at this, it looks like it's very realistic. But then when you look a little closer, you're like,
hmm
is this abstract? Like, is there something here that's a little odd? That's fascinating.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the feel that Nolan and the production design and stuff was going for, was that like kind of like look a little bit closer and everything feels off kind of feel to Gotham, which I feel like you really get.
I agree. Yeah, it is. I rewatching this movie and going through, like, everything looks like a big city, right? Like everything in
Yeah.
Gotham. It's almost like, and it's like this in the comic books. I feel like this is a good example, like where they were able to grab something and kind of have a very clear vision to make it in real world that captures what the comic books do. Because the comic books have like Gotham is like the dark, gritty side of New York or Chicago,
Right.
and Metropolis is like the bright, happy. So if you've ever been to a big city, so many of the things they show, you'll see that stuff
Yeah.
that'll happen, but it's like it's only that stuff in Gotham, and
Mhm.
it, amplified. It's like corruption's everywhere, but it's not as rampant as is in Gotham. Sketchy people getting mugged, that happens in any city, but not as much as it does in Gotham. Like,
Yeah.
and like there's almost like there's a very realistic quality, but at the same time, it's almost like a mythic archetype that's going on with Gotham. That if
Yeah.
you look a little closer, it's like, this isn't normal.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so like thinking about like the Tim Burton Batmans, like those felt like set pieces.
Yeah, that's well said.
Like you watch them and they're very like expressionistic. They feel kind of cartoony. When you look at like those city blocks in that 89 Batman, and this one is very much like it still has like what you were talking about in it, but like you said, like very grounded in the real world. So thinking about like you have the Narrows set piece,
Yeah,
which is very much like out of a comic book.
100%.
Like definitely like not. I don't know. It's weird. It's this weird in between. Like it feels grounded in the real world, but very much like a comic book set piece, which is
Yeah,
it gives you a strange feeling when you're in that set, because I don't know. It doesn't feel like, it feels like, oh, this feels like it's in the real world, but something's off about it, sort
Well,
of.
and I'll tell you an example that comes to mind when I think about that. It's like the Narrows are a great example. It is this rundown part of town, which
Hmm.
every town has an area like that. Every city has an area like that. And so that's what feels real. But then the fact that they've put it all on an island and they
Yeah.
have like 6 bridges going to it,
Yeah.
that feels strange because again, there are cities who have islands, who have bridges going into islands and stuff like that. That's in our real world. We see it. But no place has the bad part of town, the worst part of town has all been put in one little place.
Yeah.
And so it's like the island itself, if you're walking around inside of it, feels very grounded and normal. But then if you zoom out, it's like, why is it right here in this like perfect circle? And why are
Yeah.
there 6 bridges? Like, why would they do that? Like, that makes no sense. And why
Yeah.
are all those
Weird.
bridges also able to do this? Like, it's like once you kind of dig into it, it starts falling apart. But it also is like very comic booky, like you said. Like
Right.
that feels
Yeah,
like
exactly.
feels like a comic book.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that set piece in particular, I'm pretty sure was built in this like old 200-foot tall airship hangar in outside of somewhere around London, Bedfordshire, I think I wrote down.
Mm-hmm.
That whole Gotham City block, that was I think it was the Narrows that was in that airplane hangar, which is really cool. They kind of built these sets kind of all around London. Most of it was shot in London.
Yeah.
And then they spent like I want to say 3 weeks in Chicago, which, Christopher Nolan spent half of his childhood in Chicago. He's, half American, half British, and his mom was from Chicago area. So that was something that he wanted from the get-go, is him to be able to like put that Chicago influence in there,
It's
which is
funny
pretty
too.
cool.
Yeah, it is cool because it's funny because I don't know if it's because of his films or not, but like when I think of Gotham, there's something about, and it probably is now that I'm saying it, the Nolan films, that there's
Hmm.
definitely something that makes my brain drift to Chicago before any other big cities, even
Yeah,
though Gotham is in some ways no big city and all big cities at the same time. But
right.
there's something about Chicago that like draws me to him. I don't know what it is. I feel like Dark Knight particularly
Yeah.
solidified that.
Well,
Um,
Dark Knight, which we'll get into it on that episode, but Dark Knight is very much influenced by the movie Heat by Michael Mann, which is a
yeah,
very
that makes
Chicago movie.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's definitely there. And then you have the monorail in this movie, which is a very Chicago thing. The High Line in Chicago,
Yeah.
and you have that going through this Gotham. Yeah, and I think the Wayne Enterprises is like a particular building in Chicago that's like iconic. I wrote it down somewhere, but I didn't recognize the name of it. Board of Trade building. If you know Chicago and you're listening to this and you recognize
Yeah.
that building, then good for you.
Yeah. Good job. Us
Uh,
Southerners don't know it.
yeah, we don't know it. But it was shot mostly in England. And then those 3 weeks in Chicago, which is really incredible. The thing that I really like about this one is the design. We talked a little bit about the design, but the design of this like is very grounded. So you have a lot of people have kind of pointed out that it's a very much like post 9/11 emphasis on like military hardware sort of
Yeah.
thing, which is like 100% you can see. You have all this like disregarded like military stuff. There's the
Yeah.
line that Lucius Fox gives of like, why, did nobody wanted to, why don't we use this? And he's like, well, the government didn't think that a soldier's life was worth $300,000 a piece, which
Yeah.
is like, oh yeah, okay.
It's very grounded
Oh
in
yeah,
some real world stuff.
yeah. Which like it's funny because when these came out, I think they got flack for being very, very like I don't know. I think people that weren't watching very closely were like, "Oh, these are pro-war. These are pro like war on Afghanistan. They're very right wing." But like if you pay attention, like lines like that are very much like the opposite of
Yeah.
that line
Yeah.
of thinking. Very much like, no, the government doesn't care about our soldiers. Like,
It's the bottom line.
Yeah. And then the Tumbler, which is the Batmobile, they called it the Tumbler. I think they
I
call
love
it
the
that in the
Tumbler.
movie too.
I think they do as well.
Yeah. It's incredible. They built that thing from scratch for the movie, which is
And
just so
what's
cool.
wild about it is it looks like, it goes back to what you were saying about the Narrows. Like, you glance at it, you're like, oh yeah, that looks like something that a military complex would roll out. Like, it looks like a fast-moving Humvee or something like that. But then you look a little closer, and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Why does this have a jet engine on it, kind of thing? And like, you look a little closer, and you're like, oh, there's the fantastical element to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the best description I read of it was that it's like a mix of a Hummer and a Lambo, which I was like, yeah,
that's
I get
100. Yes, yeah, especially with the door. I haven't thought about that. A Hummer with a Lambo, yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh yeah, that's what it is for sure. And then on top of that, so Nolan is very popular for like being very pro celluloid film and pro like special effects, no CGI, and like
Very practical effects kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And CGI was resisted like the plague in this one. I think I read the only places they use CGI is when like literally the laws of physics caused them to, or like there was like some safety on the line sort of thing.
Sure.
Or like there's probably some sequences where like it's something that you would only see in a comic book so like something that comes to mind is like the Batman hover, like the Batman where Scarecrow's looking at Batman.
Yeah,
after
like with
inhaling
the
ooze and stuff. I'm sure that was like probably CGI'd because it's very like a comic book looking like little sequence there. So, but yeah.
Well, and I think this is something too that we sometimes don't realize how much better CGI has gotten now.
Yeah.
Than it had even
for
then.
sure.
And I mean, I think about like the Lord of the Rings movies. I feel like that's like one of the dividing lines where CGI was actually to the point where like it can hold up a few decades later. But still, like we've gotten to a point now that it's much more like you can obviously, if you know what you're looking for back then, you could tell when something was CGI and when it wasn't.
Yeah.
And Nolan being the purist he is and so detail oriented, makes sense that he was like, no, we're not gonna roll it.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other like thing production wise that I thought was really cool was he had visited Hong Kong for like some film festival or something and saw like all these shipping containers. Like there's just like this huge like place where there's all these shipping containers being moved by cranes and stuff. And so he's like, oh, I've got to get that in my movie. And really like that's where we're introduced to Batman for the first time is in that shipping container scene, which is an incredible scene.
It's one of my favorite probably scenes of Batman period. In that archetypal, every movie that every comic book Batman has to have like him taking out a dozen guys by himself. I think that's my favorite version of it. It's close because I feel like the Ben Affleck's version he did in whatever that movie was. Is that Justice League he does it? Or he like just goes through the window and takes out like 10 guys or whatever else? That one's really good too.
It was either Justice League or Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Yes, one of those. That one I think's great because it's just so freaking brutal. But but this one has the fear aspect to it
for sure.
Which this film across the board like that. This film dives into and really makes you think about what fear is, how it affects us, how we handle it, what we do with it, how you can use it in either negative or positive ways. That's a whole much deeper idea, but man, I love that scene.
Well, Batman is actually like he's actually scary in this movie.
There's like some horror elements in here. One of the things that Nolan mentioned in an interview was just how he was thinking about like why are these criminals scared of Batman? And so the thing that he reached back to was Ridley Scott's, which he loves Ridley Scott, but he reached back to Ridley Scott's Alien, which if you've ever seen that movie, which is an incredible movie by the way, you really like don't see a lot of the alien
in that
Which
whole
makes
movie,
it scarier.
which makes it scarier. It's elusive. You see glimpses of it. You see it like as it's finishing attacking someone very quickly, like, and that's kind of like how he uses Batman in these action sequences and these fight scenes. Like he's very much like that, like the alien in Alien, like kind of like coming around corners, like people are backing into him, sort of thing. Like the scene where like the guy's like, "Where are you?" and he's backing up and he goes, "Here."
Yeah. Oh my
Which
gosh.
I love.
So
Um,
good.
it made me think, like when I read like that Alien was something he was thinking about, I was like, that's very much like Alien, like someone backing up and all of a sudden it's right there behind their head.
100%. Well, and
Yeah.
even just I think about the movie, like I don't know how much of the movie, like it is abundantly clear that Batman is Batman because when those first, like when they first intro Batman in, like the scene we're talking about with the containers,
Mhm.
as well as like even some of the shots of him, like I remember that one shot I really love. It's like he looks like a gargoyle on top of the building and it's
Yeah.
like panning around, and it's almost like okay, that is something, but
Mhm.
what is it? Like you can't really tell, and it's this kind of just unknown. What is this thing? It's something, but what is
Yeah.
it? Even when you do see a little bit of it, oh, is good. It
Yeah.
definitely intensifies things.
Yeah, I mean, you think about which that is one of my favorite shots of the whole movie is where it's like panning the skyline and
Mhm.
you see him like standing up on that building like with the sunset kind of like silhouetting him is it's a that's a beautiful shot.
It
Um
is.
that felt more than anything else like a I love Chicago shot, you know, because it was like a Chicago like kind of skyline. I'm assuming that it actually probably was Chicago skyline.
Probably was.
Um,
Let's
but
say it was. Even I don't
yeah,
know. We'll probably find out and be wrong, but it
yeah.
looks
I
like
mean,
an I
just
love Chicago shot 100%.
yeah, just assuming like how much Nolan likes filming real things on location.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would almost like put money on that being a Chicago skyline shot. But yeah, um, I
I
really
find good.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I really appreciate like how he thought through how do I make Batman scary? How do I make like criminals, hardened criminals, scared of this guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, very
Which
much
do not scare easily by default because they're usually the
right.
ones scaring people.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to add too. I think one thing that adds so much to the fact of what you're talking about with him being scary and just the sense of place that this movie has a lot to do with what uh, Hans Zimmer and some of the other guys who did the audio and music for this were
Yeah,
able to
yeah.
do. I mean, just Hans Zimmer's like brilliant. Like, like I love that guy. Almost
Oh yeah.
everything he does, but like some of the audio they have been able to do and sound design in this film, it's one of those things. And you know this, we're talking on a podcast right now. Like audio, you can you can mess it up really easily.
Oh yeah.
Like, but when you get it right, it can really make even the most simple things hit so hard.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's another thing about this: the score, the film, audio design, all of it is just so well
Yeah.
done.
When you were saying that, in my mind, I was hearing like the way that the tumbler's tires like squeak when he's making hard turns.
Yeah,
That's even that like simple sound. I can hear it in my mind because it was so like detailed and well thought out like that. I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
do it like, but
And
yeah,
who knows what that was because like
yeah,
vehicles that size kind of, but probably don't make that sound. So like somebody had to come up with something intentionally
yeah,
to make that feel, but they nailed it. Like they're more
yeah,
creative and great than I am.
for sure. But yeah, you mentioned the Zimmer. It's Zimmer. And Zimmer actually brought on. So Zimmer was brought on to do it, and he actually wanted to bring on James Newton Howard to do this film with him, and which it turns out being really like insightful of Zimmer, I think, because this movie is very much about like the duality going on with between Bruce Wayne and Batman, and you
Yeah,
actually kind of have that duality even in the score because you have obviously like the kind of like very staccato like like that Hans Zimmer like is kind of like popular for.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the parts where there's like those like the swells
Yeah.
that you hear come from Howard. Howard's like part of the score. And so like I just thought that was really cool how even that like theme of duality is like you can hear it in the score with these two different like composers like kind of like fighting at each other with the music.
Yeah. That's very. I didn't realize. I didn't realize any of that. I've learned something, Eli. Congrats.
Yeah. James Newton Howard, I think he's pretty. I think one of the things he's known for is collaborations with M. Night Shyamalan. Like he did like Sixth Sense, Unbreakable Signs, The Village. Scrolling through his filmography, but he's a good composer. Zimmer's like much more well known for sure. But yeah, Zimmer actually is the one that like wanted to bring him on to do it with him, which I thought was super insightful.
That is cool.
But yeah, this is the first Zimmer Nolan collaboration. They'll do.
Really? See, because
Yeah.
I always associate the two of them together. That's one of the reasons I actually figured out who Hans Zimmer was more and more, was because I found out who Nolan was, and all of like, and then I watched some videos of him talking about why he made certain decisions and stuff, and was just blown away by the intentionality, focus, and genius that guy has. Plus, his little home studio place makes me jealous. Like, I'm like that.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Oh, you should look it up sometimes. It's like it looks like an old like wood bookshelf library, but like all the shelves are just rack mount like audio processors and stuff. And he has like a huge mixing console, but then he has like leather chairs to sit down. It's so freaking cool.
That's
awesome.
Yeah. I'll have to look up some pictures of that later. Hans Zimmer. I want to say he does everything through Dunkirk. He didn't do Oppenheimer. I know that. But yeah, I think he does like everything through Dunkirk with Nolan. Maybe he doesn't do The Prestige, but yeah, that's a great collaboration for sure. And Zimmer has even talked about like how the more he worked with Nolan, like he actually like grew in his composing because of things that Nolan wanted him to do with the score. Like Nolan very much thinks about music while he's making his movies. He doesn't like to use temp music, which a lot of directors do. They'll throw in temp music and be like, "Here, composer, I want it to sound like this." Nolan really likes to have that work kind of come from their own ideas of working together, collaborating. And so Zimmer's talked about how he loves that about Nolan, and how like things that you'll hear in the score will like come from Nolan's idea directly. Like thinking about like I think actually in Dunkirk the ticking you hear in the score is actually recorded from Nolan's own stopwatch.
See, that's what I kept thinking about when you're talking about like intentional and like audio and stuff, was like Dunkirk, like that.
Yeah.
Like, but that definitely seems like something that Nolan thought of as he was writing the script, and then was like, let's figure out this. Man, so good.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so I do want to get it. We talked a little bit about the cast already, but I do want to get into that. I did want to mention, we talked about this movie made, it was $150 million, not $150. It spent, that was the budget, and it made $375 million worldwide, which like when you think about it is like incredible. Like great return. You over doubled your return. But really, I pulled this Nolan quote that I have in the notes. He said, "People liked the film a lot, but it wasn't as successful as we expected to be."
Sure.
Which I kind of get. Like, it's this
I do
big
too.
Batman movie, and really, like, in hindsight, watching this movie again now, you're like, this should have made more money. This should be like, I mean, The Dark Knight made a lot of money.
It made a lot of money, but yeah,
this really should have been up there with
movie.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, I agree, and it's wild. But I do think, and I wonder that if it's a big Batman movie, but people went to see it and then didn't see Batman for an hour,
Yeah.
if maybe that, like, again, I think it's brilliant, but I think it's even more. I think what you said earlier rings extremely true. I think it's even more brilliant in hindsight with The Dark Knight and
Yeah.
what is the last one called?
The Dark Knight Rises.
Dark Knight Rises. Yep. Yes, I think those two make this movie even better because you understand just kind of more like across the board, and also just time has made this movie. You can realize the casting, for instance, every single character in this. I particularly Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul.
Oh, he's so good.
I never in a million years. Like, I'm not a casting guy. I would not have said that. I cannot imagine a single other actor right now that could do, like, when I think of Ra's al Ghul, that's who I think of now. Like, and one of the best Batman villains of all time. Complete side note, what an ambitious thing to do. Like, if you've read comics, Ra's al Ghul is like up there with as far as like when it comes to villains that Batman struggles with. I know the Joker's like the guy, but like when it's like there's a deep, like, this is me if I would have made a slightly different decision. And to like have that be the main bad guy in your first Batman movie is just ballsy and crazy, and it works
and
so
Scarecrow.
well. Scarecrow too, yeah. Man,
which I wonder how much of that was like, well, we did all these movies with like Joker and whatnot, and I wonder how much of it was like WB kind of like, hey, here's the villain pool you have to choose from, like choose from these. We really don't want to do Joker again yet with the iconic Nicholson. It's kind of like they really probably wanted him to like show that he could do it before they give him a villain like the Joker.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
But I don't know that I read that anywhere. I'm just kind of like
just thinking logically,
intuiting like how it probably went down.
Well, in particular, like the casting's so good in this. I mean, Morgan Freeman as Lucian, another just amazing Batman character. I think even though I'm reading here, I was reading your notes. It said that some of the folks who read for Batman, I think Christian Bale is excellent. I think he grounds this character so much. But like I'm reading here, Jake Gyllenhaal.
Jake Gyllenhaal.
I'm just I cannot picture that in my head. I can't even picture Henry Cavill, and I love Henry Cavill. I think he's a phenomenal actor, but I cannot picture him being Batman to save my life.
So I feel the same about Billy Crudup. Billy Crudup was one of them, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm not seeing it. Which it looks like he has. He was in like the Zack Snyder Justice League. I don't know what he played. It wasn't Batman, obviously, but yeah, I'm just like I don't know if I see Billy Crudup as Batman.
Maybe like this is bad, but I think he'd probably be a good villain. Of Batman, but
Henry Cavill was probably the other one that was like, I was. I don't remember if I read this or was hearing it on another podcast, but they were talking about how like during this time, at this point in time, everyone was like, it was kind of like this internet thing of like, who's going to be the next Batman? And there was like these favorites. And so I guess some of these people were in that category. I know Christian Bale was one of those that people were like gunning for. And then Henry Cavill was probably the other like really big one, which, I could see him potentially doing I think it would be a little bit different.
I agree, and this goes back to what I said earlier about Batman having so many different versions and so many different things. I would love to see Henry Cavill's version of Batman, but it would be very different from what Nolan's doing. Like Nolan's version of Batman in my brain does not fit with who Henry Cavill is, but I think like I could see him being more of like how Ben Affleck in like that Batman version. Like Henry Cavill could slot into that a lot easier in my mind.
Cillian Murphy did read for Batman, which is interesting. And actually, with Oppenheimer releasing, people were kind of talking about that more recently. And I actually saw like a clip of one of his line readings as Batman in the Batsuit, which is you can look it up.
Really?
Cillian Murphy, you can kind of see him in the Batsuit, kind of giving a line reading. But it wasn't bad. And Nolan so Nolan liked it enough, liked his Batman reading enough that he wanted him in the movie and ended up slotting him in as Scarecrow.
Yeah, which I think's excellent. Me and Angela, my wife's name's Angela, for you guys listening. We were talking the other day about Oppenheimer and some of the other stuff, and we were like, and Cillian Murphy as in general as like an actor, to be like, that's the first time I saw him in anything. And he was so freaking good then.
Oh yeah,
he's just gotten better and better and better and better and better.
Yeah, he is so very good. My wife was watching it with, like I was talking about earlier. She was watching it with me, and she was like, "Man, there's this, Cillian Murphy. He just kind of has this oddness to him that, like, she was like, he's pretty. She was like, I don't know if that's weird to say, but he's pretty. And I was like, no, he's like, he has a very pretty face. And I was like, and she was like, but it's like weird. And I was like, I've actually heard someone else talking about this. I want to say like on a podcast, it might have been the Blank Check podcast, who does a similar format as ours with filmographies. They were talking about how Cillian Murphy has this he's like got this like very pretty face, but it's almost like so pretty that like he would feel weird as the lead character. He almost has to be like this haunting kind of prettiness.
Yeah.
Which I was like, yeah, he does kind of give off that like that vibe. It's like he's a little bit too pretty, and it's like it's kind of creepy,
true too,
you know?
because like I have not seen Peaky Blinders, but he's in that. And,
he is, yeah. I've heard good things about him in that.
I have too. We had some friends staying with us over the holidays one time, and one of my friends watched a lot of it. So I saw like bits and pieces of it as I was like just going about work and life. And but it is this kind of, it's kind of going back to what you were saying about Nolan's kind of vision for this film. It's like first looking at him looks very normal, nice guy, but you look at him a little more, and it's like there's something just a little bit.
Yeah,
it's almost like that horror element of something that looks too good. You know, like when 4K like stuff came. Yeah, Uncanny Valley. That's exactly it. Yeah. Like I remember when 4K came out, and like all of a sudden you could really see the makeup on actors, and you could see like all the details was like too clear. It's like there's something about that, but I think that fits so well and kind of leans into that horror aspect with the Scarecrow in this kind of creepy.
He pulls off the creepiness.
He does.
Like
some about his eyes.
Oh yeah, he's got those like eyes that kind of like look through you, look into your soul, kind of thing. I think it's too the way he holds his face. Like he has this like it's not a smile, but it's not even a smirk. But there's this kind of like creepy like. He almost looks like he's smiling at you, but he's not, sort of thing. He's great. You said Liam Neeson already, but the way that Liam Neeson delivers those lines, which, by the way, like the lines Liam Neeson delivers feel like they're straight out of a comic book. They're like
they do.
They're kind of corny and campy in a way. But the way he delivers them makes you like, oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Listen, I heard somebody say this the other day. It's actually one of my favorite authors. His name's Brandon Sanderson. He was talking about Tolkien and talking about how Tolkien can write like a poetic philosopher. And he says, if any of us other authors write like that, we're going to get laughed out of the editing room.
Yeah.
But he can get away with it. And I feel like that's Liam Neeson. Like, I feel like Liam Neeson could say something that is so corny and comic booky and just so campy. But he can say it, and it's profound and deep, and I'm like, yes. I mean, like he can pull it off. Like, he was such so many of the lines he makes in this movie that, like, if I say, I would get laughed at. But he says them, like, and I get chills.
You must confront your guilt to find the truth behind it. And you're like,
that looks like a comic book bubble, like literally, like you can almost see it coming out. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's great.
I think. Talking about again, I think Christian Bale just nailed Bruce Wayne and Batman and this kind of dualistic nature. Because again, like I was even thinking about this, he's definitely kind of got that method acting kind of going on, and like what he looks like at the very beginning of the film, when he's like getting ready to, shoot the guy who killed his parents versus
Yeah.
after he goes through this whole transformation and comes back. I mean, physically, he looks different. And it's
Yeah.
like he's able to tap into this tension that exists in between Batman and Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
And this movie's all about that tension, honestly, kind of bouncing back and trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
But eventually he's able to like hold that tension so well. But even just doing that, like that duel and tension that's there, he does
Well,
so well.
He's so intense. Like,
Yes.
And yeah, he does have that physical transformation aspect that's so good. Both like with his appearance and then like with his voice, like while he's Batman, which like has been memed to death, but is actually like when you watch it is less like
I know.
the
It's all
memes
like,
than you think.
It's not like
yeah,
that. Yeah. It's not that bad.
But yeah, did you know? So the movie he was on before this was the Machinist or Machinist or something like that, which I haven't seen. But he
I've not seen it.
Without looking it up, do you know how much he weighed for that movie?
I've seen photos. Like I know he like dropped, like it was like 90.
It was a little more than that. He weighed 110 pounds in that movie, which is bizarre. Like
yeah.
I'm a 6-foot dude and I'm pretty skinny. I'm a pretty skinny guy. I'm the kind of guy that people are like, oh, like you have it so easy being so skinny. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, I didn't ask for this. I'm just kind of born this way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a pretty skinny guy and like I couldn't sniff 110. Like,
yeah.
And so, he did this, and when he was working with when he started talking to Nolan was like, well, like I think it would be good, like if you can bulk up, like get as big as you can, before like this comes about, so that WB isn't like oh, I don't know about this guy, he's
I don't
too
know about
little.
this, like it's a little skinny. Yeah.
And so like he actually like went too far extreme. He got up like I don't remember how much he said he weighed. It was over 200. And so like he showed up and he said like his friends were actually like joking him like, are you sure you're not doing you're doing Batman and not Fat Man? Like and so like
That's funny.
Yeah, he actually like scaled it back some from he took the get as big as you can a little too literally.
A little too. Well, you said a second ago about his intensity.
But that's in that intensity for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely there as well. I think it comes from that. And kind of going off what you were saying about Liam Neeson a second ago too, I feel like one of the things that makes this movie work is that you have some of these characters that are so intense,
mm-hmm.
and then you have them kind of complemented against like Michael Caine and particularly Gary Oldman, who are just warm, compassionate. Like I love Gary Oldman as Commissioner Gordon.
Oh, he's like, so good.
So good. Like I feel like everything that's intense and dark and he is just this guy who's a dad taking care of his family,
mm-hmm.
just trying the best. Like even like I love this scene, like his parents get shot, he's like this kid there and everyone else is just concerned about getting the guy,
mm-hmm.
getting revenge. And Commissioner Gordon, Gary Oldman's in there and he's just putting his coat around. It's like, he's like, okay. And he's more concerned about this kid than anything else. And then even later on, you've got this warmth and just down to earth, blue collar, like just good guy. And then Michael Caine's Alfred, just this more refined but just genuinely caring
mm-hmm. person
that just compliments and helps make it feel more real and make those characters feel more real.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's an incredible cast, and I think like. This movie, it's hard to say if it would work as well without this like the casting here, but yeah, I mean Gary Oldman, he's one of those like transformational actors, like transforms his appearance for his roles sort of thing, and it really he does. So like sometimes it's like very in your face. So like I think about like Darkest Hour, if you've seen that movie where he becomes my mind is totally blank.
Churchill?
Yeah, Churchill. I don't know that was like in the deep recesses of my mind, and I couldn't
It
find
happens,
it.
man. It happens.
Yeah, but it's like very much in your face, like, oh yeah, it's Gary Oldman in makeup as Churchill. But this feels less like that, but he still feels like he's embodying Commissioner Gordon. Like he feels like he is Commissioner Gordon, which I love.
Yeah. Well, and it's so good because again, Commissioner Gordon's one of those. Like all these characters are Batman. They've been done in a million different versions, but
For
like
sure.
I think he's my favorite, and I think it has a lot to do with the actor more than it does how it was written or anything else. Like he is able to capture something about Commissioner Gordon that I think has been there for so long and is so good.
Yeah.
I also wanted to note that another one person I think was just worked was Tom Wilkinson as Falcone.
Falcone. Yeah.
Sorry, my brain's breaking
Carmine
up.
Falcone.
Carmine, and like he again going back to this kind of theme of this realistic, as real as you can make a movie, obviously about a guy who's a bat vigilante. Like he just felt like a gangster, and like that conversation they have, that scene in the diner. Oh my goodness,
I love
so good.
I love it.
And he's just so, and something I love about that scene is that like Bruce Wayne is wrong and Carmine Falcone is right in that scene. Like he's 100% right about what he's saying and everything else, and he's still a bad dude.
Yeah,
a gangster straight up, but it's the most gangster. Like it's so good. And I don't know. Again, I don't know if somebody else could have pulled that off as well as he did.
Yeah, it's funny because it's very much like if you look at the like other things Tom Wilkinson is in, it's like you would never like cast him in this role. But it's very so I think like so I would say like it's less like that he's realistic gangster and more like that he's so believable as like a comic book gangster. Like,
that may be a better way of putting it.
Yeah. So because like like everything he's saying is so it feels scripted. It's like what just normal guy would like speak in this way sort of thing.
Yeah, that's true.
But also at the same time, like the persona he's like putting on and the accent, like who, like I've got guys all over this place. Like it's just like I don't know, it's just fun. I think that's the best for me. It's fun, and I could see like how some people would be like, it's kind of like too corny, like Italian mobster kind of like acting. But for me, I was like, oh, that was fun. I enjoyed
liked
that.
it. Maybe that's all it was, because I think if he was like the main guy, like the main bad guy, it probably would have worked. But I think just for him being what he was and how it played out, it was fun. It was really good.
Yeah. The other one we haven't really hit on, which quick aside, like Ken Watanabe plays the kind of like the Ra's al Ghul that's like not really Ra's al Ghul in the beginning. But and he's fine. But yeah, Katie Holmes, we haven't touched on her.
Yeah.
She gets a lot of flack, but I really don't get it. Like she's fine. Like
I don't think there's anything wrong. I don't know. I think she's fine. Going back to that diner scene,
not like fantastic or anything, but
and it's hard too because you look at this cast and everyone here is like, oh my gosh, she's like, when you have Morgan Freeman as like a little side character, it's like, what? You know what I'm saying? Like, so like, I think maybe some of it is like, I think she's good in this, but I think that her character as a whole, I think some of it has to do with the fact that her character and Batman, when it comes to love interest and stuff, there's all sorts of stuff in the comic books. And I don't really know if, and I could be wrong, like, I don't know, but I'm not 100% sure. I was unaware of her character as
she's original.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. So
which is fine.
Not in any comics.
Yeah, which is fine, and I think it works in the movie sense. But I think maybe that's some of it as well, is that there's not this groundedness in the greater mythos. But I don't think she's ever like. I never feel like she overstays her welcome. I never feel like she is. I feel like their relationship is grounded and makes sense. Some of the motivations and explains who Bruce Wayne is more, which again, is so much of the important part of this film. So I don't know. I think she does a great job.
Yeah, and I think it, you know, her character and Alfred are kind of like, they feel like they keep Bruce Wayne / Batman grounded, I
Yeah, I'd
guess.
agree.
Like they're kind of like the moral, like I guess like anchor, I guess you could say, for him. They keep him from like getting too far gone, which I think like he shows he's capable of.
Oh, 100%.
Um,
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I think even before that diner scene when he's talking, like he finds out she finds out he has the gun and everything
yeah,
else
yeah,
is like 100%. Like, we all have friends like that who who help us not become the worst version of ourselves that we could have been. And I think there's a good argument to be made that without people like Commissioner Gordon and Alfred and Katie's character, what is Katie's character? Rachel? No,
Rachel, yeah,
Rachel. Yeah,
hmm
without them, Bruce Wayne would have been Ra's al Ghul would have been
yeah,
just a monster. He would have just been
yeah,
Bat, no man.
yeah, and we can probably get into a little bit, like the reason for that. Like, so you have this. I mean, you have this character that's a billionaire.
Yeah,
And so like I read like Christopher Nolan, like the question he asked himself is like, why should anyone like care about or root for a billionaire as a protagonist? Which is a
that's
good
fair.
question,
That's a very fair question.
like why does he need us to root for him and like be like on his side sort of thing? He's a billionaire, like um and I think a lot of that comes into, you know, what we've sort of been talking about with that it's that first hour, you know, of the
Yeah,
movie where he's becoming Batman. Like he isn't Batman yet. He's still in the process of getting there. But I do think like you see, so like that scene with Rachel is pretty key because you see like he's back in town. He's got the gun. He's basically gonna shoot the guy
hundred
that killed
percent.
his
Yeah,
parents. You know, he's getting out on he's like squealing on someone on Falcone or something, got information, and they're gonna put him on parole, release him. And he's like he's right there and is about to like pull a gun out and shoot the guy. Um and you know, one of Falcone's men shoot him before he
where
can.
he gets a chance. Yeah,
Yeah, but it's that you really believe like he was gonna do it. Um,
yeah. You can almost see it. Like, and I think Christian Bale does a great job of this. Like, you can
mhm,
definitely see that his character understands the consequences if he goes through with what he's going to do with.
yeah,
Yet he's 100% going to do it. Like it's not
yeah,
like he's wrestling with it. He's made his mind up. He knows what the cost is going to be, and it's like his pain from losing his parents and all the fallout from that has just welled up that he's like he doesn't care anymore.
yeah,
Like, this is what he's going to do. This he's going to make this decision, and then it's stolen from him, and he's even
mhm,
more angry that vengeance wasn't his.
yeah, and it's this mix of fear and guilt. So like from the you know you get all those flashback sequences in the first half. So he's you know he's training with Ra's al Ghul up in the mountains and all that, but you also get all these flashbacks to him as a kid. You have him falling into the well and getting scared by the bats, which you know Rachel was a part of that. So you have that connection going back to childhood, which is a very unique Batman, you know,
Yeah,
sort of thing. You don't have that anywhere else. But then like you have the flashbacks of him going to the play. It's the opera, I think, with his
yeah,
parents. And you know you got that origin short story of his parents getting shot, and all of that. You know, you talked about the sequence with Gordon in the police station after his parents have been shot. Like you see like the fear on the kid's face, but also like you see guilt. So like they left the opera because he was scared because
yeah,
there were the bats in the opera that, you know, people dress like bats. And so you know
yeah.
he kind of is holding on to this. I almost feel like it's like this, the fear inside of him is both like fear that's like left over from that event, but also like fear that's driven by his guilt. like he feels guilty and responsible for his parents dying because he asked them to leave, but also like he feels guilty for what he wants to do because of that too. And
Yeah.
it's like this cycle of fear and guilt that
Well, I
are
think
like building up.
I think you're right on point. Like the whole movie is really about how do we handle the fear and what do
Mhm.
we do with it? Because you have to do something with it. And I think you're exactly right. Like I think he's almost he's almost got a deep fear of being afraid. Like he is terrified of the fact that his fear was what cost him everything else, and that would
Mhm.
be able to do that again. And the fact that there's some weakness in this fear, and not understanding that fear is natural and normal for all of us, and kind of wrestling with through some of that, and also understanding the power that fear has over us to
Mhm.
dictate our decisions. Because I think if he wouldn't have been willing to pull that trigger there, he wouldn't have understood that there's a power that fear has to motivate us and move us in ways that can be leveraged for good, maybe, which is basically
Sure.
what he ends up doing,
Mhm.
versus then it just being used to manipulate people.
Yeah.
And I think it also masterfully, without having to use a single word, when he's after that conversation with Rachel afterwards, and she slaps him about having a gun and everything else.
Mhm.
He's sitting there like by the bay, and he chunks it in the water. I think
Yeah.
Nolan masterfully uses no words to explain why Batman has the one rule he has, that he does not
Yeah.
use guns and shoot people. Like
Yeah.
in a way that is so good and so great at cinema, that being able to communicate something without even having to use words, but just the
Mhm.
scene of what's being showed, we understand
Visually,
100%
yeah.
buy into that this is why Batman is the way he is,
Mhm.
because he's afraid of these things, but also at the same time, he's afraid of how fear could push him to even embrace something that once took everything from him.
Yeah. Yeah, and Ra's al Ghul, when they're in this like fighting, training sequences, I think says something to that effect at some point to him, like, you're afraid of what's inside you. You're afraid of where it might take you, like what it might like cause you to do
Yeah.
eventually if you let it, keep building. Which it's really like ironic that Ra's al Ghul is like, he really is like spitting out all these like psychological truths about Batman and like helping him grow. And like he's the antagonist like the whole time.
Yeah,
um,
but he
they're
also
so
like
close. They're
yeah,
so close. It's just that one difference of like the compassion for Bruce, it's there, and for Ross, it's not.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that makes Ra's al Ghul such a great character, is like him and Batman are the same person. Like
Yeah.
they are the same person. And all that is different is that Bruce sees himself as a protector and
Mhm.
has been shown compassion, versus Ra's al Ghul, who thinks he should be the one in charge, be a tyrant ultimately.
Yeah.
Like everyone else is lesser than him and needs to be dealt with. And it
Yeah.
is really that compassion element of like, because they're the same in so many
Mhm.
ways, and what makes them so interesting and so dynamic is because of that.
Yeah, it's so like it makes you think like how, and this is for sure like I'm sure something Christopher Nolan was thinking about with these characters is how like, because he's talked about how he's interested in those moral dilemmas, like those, he's interested in asking the questions like of why we do what we do as human beings, like what are our motivations. And so like, he for sure was thinking about this difference in these two characters of like them being so close together. It's just like one little like piece of who they are that totally changes the trajectory of like their methods and the way they go about, doing what they do. And it really is like that, I almost wonder if like Roz, you might be more well versed in the character. I almost wonder if he like has never had like an Alfred. He
Oh
was left to
yeah,
his own to like steep in his grief
yeah,
without someone like Alfred to like pull him back to reality, sort of thing.
yeah, and
Um,
I would argue that that's probably the biggest thing, is that Ra's al Ghul has been shown that there is no mercy.
Yeah.
And what you just said made me think about the line he says there is that, like, going back to what those questions Nolan has. I think one of Liam Neeson's Ra's al Ghul's lines in this is, um, make people desperate enough, they'll all become criminals. Talking about how they have been
Mm-hmm.
doing subtle manipulations of Gotham to try to get it to collapse for a very long time.
Yeah.
And so he sees that as a fact that this is a place that needs to be eliminated because it is too dark to save. Whereas Batman sees that as, you've been trying to destroy this place and it's not been destroyed yet because there are
Mm-hmm.
people here who are good and trying, even though
Yeah.
you've been putting. That's really that view of humanity in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think you're right. Like, because there's a later comic art where Ra's al Ghul. So Batman has a relationship with Ra's al Ghul's daughter and has a son. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know that. His son grows up and gets raised by Ra's al Ghul and
Yeah.
in that ninja academy, then ends up becoming Robin for Batman later on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting because he is ruthless and just vengeance, and constantly Batman's having to show him, like, we do not just kill people.
Yeah.
Like, that is not the solution to this. So I think you're exactly right. Like, I think it's that there's never been shown another way, and so
Yeah.
Ra's al Ghul is just, this is who he is.
Yeah. Which it just goes to show you, like, how important the people around you are for your life. Like, it can totally change the trajectory of your life, like who you allow to, like, speak into your life, which, is there's tons of things you can pull out of themes in movies like this, but that's definitely one that's apparent in that difference between Bruce and Ra's al Ghul. With but
well,
yeah,
I think too.
Go ahead.
Well, I think too. Like, you're exactly right. Like, we all have influences on our life, but we also all have good and bad things that happen to us. And the
Mm-hmm.
question is how are you going to respond and see those things, right?
Yeah.
Like, depending on how you do that, I know people in real life who've gone through significantly tragic and horrible things who have much more positive outlooks than I do. And then I know people who are much better off than even I am, who are billionaires.
Yeah.
And, I don't know billionaires, guys, just a heads up, but, like, they're, like, got everything you can imagine they need. And they're seeing it as, like, the worst thing in the world. So much of it is understanding, what is the purpose behind this stuff and everything else? What's your motivating driving force? And those
Mm-hmm.
fundamental beliefs that you have always eventually come out into your actions. And we
Yeah.
see that so well in this, that there's a belief in Gotham and a belief that Gotham needs to be destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's driving both of these actions, which ultimately brings them into conflict with each other.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it really is, like, I like this. What I like about this movie, and I think why it works so well with Christopher Nolan, is because he can be a little bit expositional in his dialogue.
Yeah, I agree.
Kind of like telling you exactly what he wants you to, like, the ideas he wants you to reckon with. But with a comic book movie like Batman, which is very much like dialogue, tell you exactly what you need to hear, like, driven, if you're taking directly, like, from comic book, like, it works really well. It just, like, I guess, like, there's a certain degree to where you have to, like, put yourself in that mind space where, like, which most people are able to do when they go and see, like, a Batman movie. They kind of are in that mind space of, like, yeah, people are gonna, like, talk in a different way because it's a comic
Sure.
book movie. And so I think it ends up, like, being to Christopher Nolan's strength that, like, he has admitted that, like, he's not the best with dialogue. That's, like, the last thing that that is on his mind when he's writing movies.
Sure.
And so he actually says, like, he writes a lot of stuff, and then, like, that's one thing that he cuts down on a lot, and cuts down to, like, what he thinks is the best of everything he wrote. But yeah, I just think that works really well with this movie. He has these ideas of fear and of guilt and of moral quandaries and moral grounding, like, what are we going to do with the life that's given to us, sort of ideas that I think he just explores very, like, openly, and kind of like explicitly, that I appreciate, because it is accessible to like a wide audience.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I find fascinating by it is the question of what do you like the kind of like the overarching question of this movie is like what are you gonna do? What do you do with your fear?
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the driving point is like Bruce Wayne struggling with it. And you see all these different characters who do it different ways. You got like Falcone who's using it to manipulate and to
Yeah.
gain power and to push people down to lift himself up. You've
Mhm.
got like the cops who are using fear and their kind of power to like push people down and to again do the same thing kind of Falcone does on a different way, different scale. You've got you have Scarecrow who's doing almost this like psychological, almost like fetishizing to some degree, like
Yeah.
what's going on with fear and kind of having this real kind of thing. And then you got like Batman who ultimately ends up using fear and using it as a tool to defend people with
Yeah.
using it for that. And then you have like Ra's al Ghul and his company that is using fear and power to destroy.
Yeah.
And it's really just this really intriguing question of like, okay, we all of us, all humans have fears. And the question is, what are we doing with them? Like, like, where do we end up doing stuff with them? Where do we end up walking away with that? And I think that's why movies like this stick around and like resonate more with us, because ultimately there's something that all of us deal with in here, that we can relate to when we look at Bruce Wayne and we relate to all these other guys. And I think even in Ra's al Ghul, like the thing about Ra's al Ghul in this movie is that he makes sense. Like his argument makes sense. Falcone's argument makes sense to him. And like, I think if we're honest with ourselves, our own hearts sometimes won't use our fear, let our fear make us take actions that do certain things in certain ways because we've not harnessed it and we've used it in other ways, or we've used it intentionally to manipulate situations. And man, those are relatable things of being a human being.
For sure. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. There's a lot of great stuff in this that we could go on for. Let me ask you this.
Yes.
What is your favorite sequence in the movie? I think that's a fun question to think about. I have mine, or at least my favorite action sequence for sure.
So I think, it's hard. I really, really like, I really like the containers, like when Batman first shows up.
Okay.
That's high. But right next to it is, I think the tumbler chase.
Yes. That's the right answer.
Is that what you were thinking too?
Yeah.
What I was thinking about, it's kind of, they're similar. It's interesting because they're similar in some ways. Because one of my favorite things about the tumbler chase is like when he goes like black out, they're like, "Where's he at?"
Yeah.
And then he turns on and like runs over police cars. It's like so good. It's so ridiculous and awesome. Like that's probably my favorite. Bar none.
Yeah, I think. I love. I mean, the shipping containers is a great action piece, like, and then you get to end with like the first bat signal, which is really fun.
Yeah, it's really awesome.
He has Falcone kind of hanging up there making the bat signal on the spotlight. Really cool. But yeah, that tumbler sequence. So one of the reasons that I think I say it's my favorite is because it's kind of like the action sequence that like just like, especially for this series, like points forward to how adept and like good Nolan becomes at these big action set pieces. Like because some of the closer up combat stuff is a little choppy, like not refined, not as refined as like other action directors.
Sure.
But the big action set pieces, which the tumbler
Nolan figures
chasing
those out.
Like he becomes so good at those, and this is like the beginning of that, I think.
What makes me think about, and again, I know this calls forward to the other movies you're going in detail, but it makes me think about the semi truck flip scene. Like that's what it like. That's the Dark Knight one that makes me think of, and they're in the same vein, but you see it's almost like an escalate. Like it's been taken to the next level, like the new iteration, but it's the same kind of DNA. Yeah, it's good. And I know we were talking like how dark and heavy this was with fear and stuff. But this movie also has some pretty hilarious points, I might add. It's funnier than I remember. I never think
I wrote
back
that
to
down.
Batman.
Funnier.
Well, it made me think about that made me think about it a little more too, because I was like, I don't think about this film as being funny, but there's some pretty funny lines in here,
Yeah.
and particularly one of my one of my favorite funny lines is when the house is burning down and
Uh-huh.
Alfred comes in and he's under like a log, and his line is like, "Master Wayne, what use are all these push-ups if you can't move like a log?" And I
Yeah.
was just like, dude, you just got roasted. Like literally, you're on fire right now.
Yeah.
But just, it's so funny. Like little things, like it's so like the humor in this one is
Yeah.
so clever and
Mhm.
so good.
Yeah, and then you've got like the stuff that like pays off later. Like you got the flipping of the like didn't you get the memo sort of thing, which are just kind of like
Yes.
ha.
Yes. So good.
They're not like laugh out loud funny, but they're like ha, got him.
Yeah.
Kind of funny, which is fun for this movie, I think. Yeah, even Bruce delivers some funny lines, like when he comes in from the Tumblr action sequence, and you know Alfred's getting on him, and he's like, "What? You know, I thought you weren't gonna do this," and he's like, "You know, well, what is that?" And Bruce looks down, and he's like, "Really good television," which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a humor to it, like that again, I think helps balance out all the
Yeah,
because life is not always serious.
yeah,
It's also
yeah.
not always like ridiculous either. So like, you know, I don't know about you, but like some of the more intense days I've had and stressful things that have been happening, there's still funny moments and quippy
Oh,
things
yeah.
in there, as well as like deep, hard, difficult stuff at the same time.
For sure.
Yeah, it's so good. I love the I was trying to just think of little things that this film I love. I love, like, one of the things I really appreciate is like when they're going back to the beginning, when he's doing the training stuff with Ra's al Ghul, like that whole ice, like the fight on the ice. I love
Mhm.
that scene. One of the things I really love is how like I keep forgetting what the organization's called. My brother's like
League of
shunning
Shadows?
me. League of Shadows. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So like I really love how the League of Shadows has like those pauldrons that have like
Oh, yeah.
and they like fly out.
Yeah.
Like that is that was just one of those things, again, it makes it feel very grounded and
Mhm.
connecting back. But I just love little things like that they did
Mhm.
throughout the whole thing, and like when he's
And
like
it
trying to
points
figure out,
forward to like what he does with his suit too, you know,
yeah,
which is a
exactly.
cool like little thing that you can notice.
Yeah, exactly. And so like I love all those little things, which I know Nolan thought through some of that stuff and everything
Mhm.
else. But it's just so
He used
clever.
bats.
He used a
It's
lot
like-
of bats.
Like when does Batman ever use you don't ever get to see Batman use bats, and he uses bats in this one, which is so fun. With when he jumps down the stairwell thing.
That's a great
Oh,
scene
man.
too, man.
Yeah. And then like the other like we mentioned way earlier the iconic like Chicago skyline shot. But the really like iconic shot is like when he finds the Batcave, and
Yeah.
you have
that was
like
awesome.
the bats like flying around him, and he's just like standing there like arms out. It's like the culmination of him like confronting his fear, sort of
Well, and
thing.
if I
so
remember that
fun.
shot, yeah, it is. It's a great shot too, because I feel like again it goes back to kind of like that gun, like throwing the gun in the river. Like it tells a
Mhm.
story without ever using words.
Yeah.
Because if I remember that shot right, it begins with him like almost like bats come out and he gets afraid for a second, and then it's like he just
he's in
kinda
this house
eases
and
up
there's a bat in
into it.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I guess like just final thoughts, you know, kind of wrapping this Batman Begins talk up.
Yeah, man.
One of the things, so like, you know, if you're a first time listener, I usually like to kind of have my own like takeaway, like thematic takeaway as a final thought. And one of the things I was thinking about is how like Bruce's father, like he's portrayed as a very like good man in this movie, and like I mean
Yeah.
his dying words are "Don't be afraid," which is you know, it's very endearing. But at the same time, like you get the sense as Bruce is like reckoning with who he is and his legacy, following his father, you get the sense that he saw the flaw in how his father operated too. His, you know, it's even like visually shown with like the monorail, like the lifted monorail that he's on. He's like, I built this train, but like as they're like dressed up in nice like fancy clothes riding this monorail right above
Homeless
the
people
narrows
underneath. Yeah.
yeah, it's like you get the sense that Bruce really saw, and it's part of the reason why you can sympathize with him easier is because, he intentionally like puts himself like in, that those first sequences, like in the slums, in situations where like he really has to learn what it's like to live like that.
To be desperate, yeah.
Yeah. And so, I don't know. I was just thinking about like that and the fact that like, just like generational legacy, I think is a cool idea that's explored in Batman some, especially when you start getting into like his relationship with his father's company and what his father did, and different story arcs. But yeah, I was just thinking about that and like thinking about how like, how important it is to look at the flaws in previous generations, like learn from their flaws, and like try to grow from them. And then too, just like, we both have young children and thinking about like, what are the flaws in myself and like in our generation that we can like actively, like his father was not telling him this is my flaw, but like me as a father,
exactly.
like what are the flaws that I see in myself and my generation as a whole that I can help that I can like encourage my children to like fix and do better with. I don't really have an answer for that, but it just got me thinking about that idea of like generational growth and stuff.
And I think sometimes just being aware of those questions helps you, because like I think the same thing. Like, my wife's pregnant right now. We're about to have a son. I know you have a son too. And so I think about this a lot. It's like my dad, I love him to death. And there's so many things about my dad I love. There's so many things about my dad that were not perfect. He didn't like broadcast that to me because in some ways we don't see those. They're blind spots to us.
Yeah.
But and I think you're exactly right. Like Bruce Wayne's dad in here is portrayed in a way that he's a good man, but
he's a good man,
it all together.
But
and Bruce is trying to take it and take the good parts and also take some. And what's interesting is like none of us are perfect. So like I think we even find this by the end of the trilogy that like his methods and stuff are not the answer to what's going on either, right? Like it's not the same thing as dad didn't get right, he didn't right because there's something deeper going on. But I do think it shows us like there's an intentional point. And I think part of the reason that Bruce ended up taking this fear and going the direction he did with it was because of his dad, right? Yeah. And like if his dad would not have showed him who he was, good, bad, and ugly, and been open, and he wouldn't have done that, he could have just been a copy of that and all the bad and never changed. And there's something there. I don't have an answer either.
It's like Bruce sees like the compassion that his father definitely has. Like his father definitely has compassion. It's just like what he does with the compassion isn't a step far enough. And so Bruce is like, I want to take the compassion my father had, keep that going with Wayne Enterprises and what Wayne Enterprises does, but take it a step further personally than my dad did. And so, that's just something I was thinking about. But
it is good because it reminds me of like, I mean, we're around lots of Christian people, and sometimes like some bad things happen, and they're like thoughts and prayers and stuff. It's like, well, sometimes you need to do something more. But then other times, like people think they're helping, and they're just like like for instance, Bruce's dad, good guy, wants to take care of people. It's going to fix Gotham's poverty rate and all this other stuff. Train. Like, right. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he's convinced, and like again, this is like we could do so. And the Bruce same way is like, it's going to solve the problem. Me dressing up as a bat and running around at night. Right? Well, no, like there's something more going on here. But it's like maybe certain situations and stuff. It definitely points to the fact that like there's something there. It's like just keep don't get stuck.
We'll get there.
And I'm just hoping my child never ends up being a vigilante. That's my goal.
That's a good goal.
As a father. A good goal. So
this is I mean, I'm excited to get into the others of this trilogy. I really think so like this one obviously, like I think the scale grows. We kind of talked about that. Like,
it does.
So this one is like Bruce reckoning with fear on a personal level, and the next one is kind of like a communal reckoning with fear, and then the last one feels like a whole society reckoning with
100.
fear.
Yeah,
And
no,
so
I
it's
think
like,
that's
just the scale grows and grows. So I'm excited to kind of follow that journey.
But
And
I
then
think I'd argue that this is the best one in the trilogy, even though I think, like, technically, I think The Dark Knight is a better film, like, if it's just mathematical, but I think this one's better because of the character development. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I think character development is what makes stories so good. And, like, this one has the most out of all of them. And I realize an hour of just Bruce Wayne, but by the end of an hour of understanding Bruce Wayne, you understand Bruce Wayne. And again, going back to that question you said that, Christian Bell asked himself, like, who's going to root for a millionaire? Well, everyone who's in a theater after watching an hour of understanding this, they're rooting for a billionaire because they understand, right? And I think that's what makes this movie so good.
Yeah. I don't know if I can say it's better than The Dark Knight. Right now, I would still put it behind it. But I'm gonna watch The Dark Knight again soon for the series. So TBD, I guess, on that.
Well, I can't wait to hear what you think.
Yeah, I do love one of the things I do love about this movie, which I can't remember if it does it in the others as well, but the title of the movie is at the very end, which is appropriate because that is like, okay, this is the beginning of Batman. Like, you get Batman Begins title right there at the very end, which I thought was cool.
I feel like they all do that because I feel like The Dark Knight Rises, I feel like, does it at the very end too, because it's almost like
that's when he becomes the Dark Knight, quote unquote.
Yes.
And then I think you're right. So that's a cool. That's
and
a
knowing
cool,
Nolan, that was very intentional and like thought out. So
yeah, that's fun.
Awesome.
Yeah, what would you rate? What do you have this one rated?
All right, so what's your rating scale? Tell me
that. So, like,
first.
I usually go with like 5 stars, like with half stars available.
Half stars available.
Yeah.
I would say, like, out of all movies all time, like, I don't
know. People, it's very subjective. People
I'm gonna say
rate
4
things in different way.
I'm gonna say 4. I would say my favorite movie is a Christopher Nolan movie. My favorite movie is Inception. Like, I love Inception. Like, it is my favorite movie. So that would be
a 5 for you?
That'd be a 5 for me. And like, and I love The Dark Knight. I think, I love all these movies. I do think that, but I think I'd rank this one and Dark Knight both 4. Like, but I think if I had to go into niche, I think I like Batman Begins more in hindsight, in retrospective. Originally, I would have told you the other way around, but I think in retrospective, maybe it's I've spent too much time, Eli, preparing for this podcast, thinking about it, so I've kind of fallen in love with this more. But yeah, I think it's a solid 4. I'd say, like, my favorite movies that are 5s, I would say, are probably Inception and probably all the Lord of the Rings movies. But I have a very soft spot for hobbits in my heart. So
yeah, that's fair. I mean, they're very lovable creatures.
They are lovable creatures. So, anyways, but yeah, no, solid 4. It's great. I also think what you this is one of those movies I would show anyone, whether they like comic book heroes or not. Like, I'm saying, like, I have a close friend of mine who is not, like, I'm a very big geek. Like, you can't see this, but I have a map of Skyrim right here and a Master Sword from Zelda and a map of Middle Earth above me, and tons of geeky things all over the place. Love geeky stuff, and but I have some close friends who are not, like, they've never seen Star Wars. I actually showed them the first Star Wars movie. Like, I have a lightsaber sitting over here on my shelf, so, like, I'm uber geek. But, like, this is one of those movies that even if you are not a geeky, nerdy person, because of how Nolan envisioned it, I feel so comfortable. It's just a good movie, period. Like, even if Batman's not Batman, if he's just some other hero or some other character, it works because the film's foundationally so good.
Yeah, and you don't have to watch 25 other films.
Yes, or read an entire backstory to. The Marvel whole MCU was wonderful.
It's tiring.
But after Endgame, I don't think I've seen a single movie like it. They should have just stopped. It's like,
it's exhausting.
Just don't care. I don't care.
Oh, man.
I heard the newest MCU movie coming out, the Marvels or whatever, is only going to be like 95 minutes. It's only like an hour and a half long. Yeah, but it's crazy that they're making that short of a movie. That's just crazy to me. Runtime.
Yeah.
Maybe not
Maybe
90
that's
minutes. Maybe 100.
promising. Maybe it won't
Maybe, I don't
feel.
know.
Maybe it won't feel so long. I don't know. I don't
Oh.
know. I'm at this point. I just watch them when they come on Disney Plus, like while I'm doing dishes or something.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Hey,
Yep. We have
talking
next.
about
I was just gonna say we have The Prestige as the next movie, which is near and dear to my heart. Love The
it's an excellent
Prestige.
movie. It's very high on my list too.
Yeah, so be looking for that next week. We are going to take a quick break here and come back with a little bit of movie news, not much, and do our movie draft, which I'm excited. This week we're doing a DC movies draft that you don't want to miss. So quick break, and we will see you again in just a second. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on the Establishing Shot today. We hope you're enjoying the episode so far, and we hope you'll stick around for the segments we have coming up after this quick break. But during this break, I wanted to tell you how you can get more involved with the Establishing Shot podcast. There are several ways you can do this. The main way you can do it is by going to establishingshotpod.com, our website where you can find all sorts of information like episodes with the show notes on there, information about our guests for each episode. You can find reviews there, and there's a page where you can actually leave a review on the website if you want to. You can see all the platforms where the podcast is available, like Apple, Spotify, all the major podcast platforms, and even a link to our YouTube page where you can see a video version of the podcast. So please go to the website. And the place I want to highlight there is our donate page, which has information about our Establishing Shot family. This is a way that you can subscribe to the podcast to support all the efforts and the stuff that goes into making this podcast good and making it better than it even is now. We have different tiers that you can subscribe to, starting at $5. And what this will do is you'll be able to support the podcast, help me make it better, and also at the same time, you'll get early and ad-free episodes. You'll get access to our Discord server where you can join in and just kind of talking about movies with a community that loves film. And so we would love to have you in there. And then the higher up in the tiers you go, the more you get. Even things like chats and video chats that we'll do every once in a while where we get to talk about in more detail stuff that we're talking about on the podcast. So I hope you'll subscribe to that. Choose a tier that fits your budget, and I would love for you to support the podcast in that way. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is where you can find us on social media. You can find me personally on Twitter at the Eli Price, and you can also follow me on Letterboxd. Letterboxd is kind of like a social media for movie reviews, so you can read my reviews there, and you can find me there at just Eli Price, no spaces or anything. So I'm on Twitter and Letterboxd. You can find the podcast on all the social platforms as well, such as Twitter at eShotPod, and then on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok at Establishing Shot Pod. So make sure to follow us so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments about the episode or about the podcast, you can always email us at establishingshotpod@gmail.com. And the very last thing I want to do before you get back into the episode today is just ask you to please go to Spotify and Apple and leave some ratings and reviews. That really helps the visibility of the podcast and gets it in more people's podcast feeds. And so we hope you will do that for us, and we would greatly appreciate it. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode, and I will see you next time on the Establishing Shot podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Establishing Shot. I'm Eli Price here with Drew Feltz. We had a fun conversation on Batman Begins. Really, it was fun. I enjoyed that.
I love talking about Batman.
Oh yeah, for sure. But yeah, we have a little bit of movie news. There's this one big movie coming out this weekend, the weekend of the release of this podcast. Obviously, most people know I record these way ahead of time, but so The Creator is coming out this weekend. Gareth Edwards, the director of this movie. It is a AI movie. I think I recently heard him talking about how like a lot of the recent AI talk is kind of built into this movie, and the ideas explored. So,
which is interesting because
yeah,
movies don't just happen like that, right? Like they take time. So
Right.
like I'm curious, and we don't have time to talk about this, but I'm curious like when he started doing this and how much of it's related to recent AI news.
yeah,
Because there's so much of that happening. Like I don't know when this comes out if the strike will be still going on with actors and stuff
Sure.
about all the AI stuff and everything. But there's so much stuff with AI nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
It's all over the place.
Yeah, it is. I almost wonder like these kind of guys that are like interested in these ideas, they're probably like tapped into the stuff before it reaches like mainstream public. So a lot of the ideas he was like hearing in the AI space, maybe he was like, oh, I want to write an AI movie. So I'm sure he's like, I got to dig into the AI space. Like a lot of these ideas and Chat GPT and stuff like that was probably like already being talked about before it hit like mainstream public like talk. So it's probably just like that, bleed over. If it is true that it's covering a lot of AI ideas that we're all talking about now.
I will say that the little
yeah.
I've seen about it, it feels like that typical Terminator Matrix, like
Sure.
machines taking over. Just, yeah, but it seems like it's kind of asking some more interesting moral dilemmas. And I'll be honest,
Yeah.
like Gareth Edwards, Rogue One, I think is so good.
Yeah. I'm
it's
not
not
as high
perfect.
on Rogue One as a lot of
Really?
people are. I think it's a fine movie. I think it has some like character building flaws.
Oh yeah, I'd agree with that.
But it is a fun movie for sure. So yeah, I'm interested to see what he does with this after Rogue One. He has a couple others too, I think, that I haven't seen.
Did he do a
I take that
Godzilla
back.
movie?
He did Godzilla. He did
Is that the newest Godzilla that came out?
He did the 2014 reboot of Godzilla that I actually thought was pretty good.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Yeah,
I loved Rogue One, and I'll say I see this in the trailer I've seen and stuff about Creator already too. Like the aesthetics, like his visuals are so good. Like that's what he nailed in Rogue One. Like beyond almost even some of the prequels Star Wars movies, like it felt like it looked like a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
And I'm intrigued. I originally was not intrigued, but now I'm intrigued. I looked into it a little more. Yeah,
we got John David Washington too, as the lead in this, which I'm interested. I feel like his career hasn't quite taken off yet.
What has he been in?
He was in Tenet. He's in Black Klansman, which was actually really good. He was good in that. He's been in a few other things. Amsterdam. He's credited for being in Malcolm X, but I'm sure he was a kid at that point. Obviously his father played Malcolm X, so I'm interested to see his career, like John David Washington's career too. So that's another reason I'm interested in this movie. But I also just saw that Sturgill Simpson is in this movie, which is really random. Do you know Sturgill Simpson?
I don't think I do.
He's like a country artist. You would actually probably really like him. His music is really good. But yeah, that's totally random. I didn't know that.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, I don't have anything profound to say about this movie. Obviously, it hasn't come out yet at this point. But yeah, it's the first movie, like, right now it's early September as we're recording, and like it's the only movie in like all of September that I'm like, I might try to make it to the theater for that one. So if that tells you anything.
I know, I get that.
Yeah.
The rest of the movies coming out period either right now. So
Yeah, but yeah, that's really, I think that's it for movie news. I think we should just go ahead and jump into our movie draft, which is what the people want, what the people need. They need the movie
It is what the
draft.
people need.
Yeah, let's give it to them. We're doing DC movies. So, yeah, I mean, it DC. So, like, DC movies have a bad rap recently, but there's actually like a lot of DC movies
There
throughout.
are.
Yeah, there's a lot to choose from, and a lot of really good ones and fun ones. Usually when we do these, I didn't mention this to you off air. Usually we take the director of that's like part of the series. We take their movies out
Oh,
of the
that's fair.
draft. But I think we should keep them in for this one. Because I think if people are like looking at our, not listening to the episode and then looking at our draft and like, why didn't they take The Dark Knight?
Where's
Why
the
didn't they
Dark
take
Knight?
Batman Begins? You know,
We're all
so
good.
I think just for the sake of that, I think let's leave them in for this one. I think it would be, I just think it wouldn't be as fun if they weren't in there. So
quick question: are we talking about like our animated movies in this?
yes,
And does the Lego Batman movie count?
yeah,
Okay,
it's
that's
a
all I needed.
feature length DC.
It is, yeah.
Like,
Have you
in the
seen that?
opening, in the opening credits, that DC logo comes across the screen.
DC logo comes. All right,
It's
cool,
a DC movie. Yeah. And there's actually other like live action movies that are based off of, lesser known graphic novels. That
I think
I don't
Constantine. I like
Constantine,
2000.
but also like stuff like Stardust,
Yeah, that's
which was
true.
a Neil Gaiman, which I haven't seen, so I'm not going to draft it. You're welcome to if you like it and have seen it, but
I have not seen that either, but I know
yeah.
what you're talking about.
But yeah, stuff like that. That's kind of like lesser known, but yeah, yeah. Let's if you've never listened to the movie draft before, basically it's like picking the best kickball team, except it's categorized. So we're picking from DC movies, and basically like me and Drew are going head to head, picking movies for our team, so that we have the best team of DC movies. So yeah, I think we should kick it off. Where are you going to go with pick number one? Before we go, I'll have this fun sound. Here we go.
That was
All right.
good.
Yeah. All right, where are you going to go with the first pick?
I think I got to go with one of Nolan's trilogy. And since I said that I think Batman Begins is better than The Dark Knight, I'm going to say Batman Begins. Since we talked so much about it, like I just got to put it in here. If we're
That's
counting
fair.
those, that's where I start.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with any of the Nolan trilogy, I don't think.
No, I think they're all excellent. But I'm going to go
yeah.
Batman Begins because of Ra's al Ghul primarily.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of underrated at this point. But yeah, Batman Begins. Let's just knock it off. Let's just be done with Nolan right from the get-go. I'll go ahead and take The Dark Knight, and we'll just be done with Nolan, and we can move on
fair.
to all the other ones.
Because I will say, out of the three, I think The Dark Knight Rises fumbles a bit more in certain spots.
Sure.
I think it's almost like Star Wars, right? Like the first movie's good, Empire kind of spikes it and then kind of comes down a little bit. That's how I feel about that. I'm fine with that.
Sure.
And more Nolan. All right, so I will stay in the Batman theme because I adored 2022's The Batman with Robert is Pattinson. Is that right? I'm not a Twilight fan. That's all I know him from, and I relentlessly picked on my wife when I found out that he was gonna be Batman. But I will admit, I loved that movie, and I thought he was an excellent Batman, and I thought it was so good.
So when I saw this, when I walked out of the theater, I was like, I think this is just as good as The Dark Knight. And I've rewatched it since, and I still kind of feel that way.
It's definitely a different take.
It is. Yeah.
Kind of how Nolan had a very concise vision, and I don't even know who directed that. That sounds bad.
Matt Reeves.
Is it Matt Reeves? I think Matt Reeves has a very focused, singular vision for what he wants that Batman to be, and I think it's really captures that well.
Yeah. I'm excited for the second one. whenever it
Me
comes
too.
out.
When is that?
He's shown that he can do a franchise. He did the Planet of the Apes trilogy.
Yeah, that's right. Those were so good.
Yeah, and so he's kind of shown that he can kind of take a franchise and run with it. So I'm excited to see. I think the second one's slated for like, I don't know, 25 probably.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing is 25. So we've got a while, but yeah, it's worth the wait, I'm sure.
I agree.
Yeah, so I agree. I loved that movie. It was so good.
It was so
yeah,
good.
Robert
man.
Pattinson is actually a really great actor.
Yeah, I was.
It's like
blown
watching
away.
Matthew McConaughey do rom-coms and then like do such good
Yes.
movies after that. He was in Tenet, which I don't know if you've seen Tenet yet.
I've actually not got to see Tenet yet.
Yeah,
It's on the list, but
yeah, he was
life.
great in that. The Lighthouse, which is a trip. It's hard for me to say I recommend watching The Lighthouse. It's a very strange movie, but he is very good in it. So do you remember he was in Harry Potter Goblet of Fire? He plays Cedric Diggory in that.
Yeah. Yes, I do remember that. Because my wife is always sad when he dies because she had a crush on him back in the day, and I'm like,
that's great. All right, I think it's time. Let's move on to the Pattinson talk. I'm gonna go with another recent movie, a movie that I was surprised by how much I liked it, and I'm gonna take the James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. Not Suicide Squad, The Suicide Squad.
It was which I think James Gunn has that misfit group thing figured out.
Yeah.
He's proved that with Guardians. But yeah, it was super fun. I feel like he took everything from the first attempt at Suicide Squad that was good and brought that over and then just added more of his stuff in it and went, and it had Nathan Fillion in it for a little while. It was a very short amount of time, and I love Nathan Fillion. I like everything he does. So
and it was very funny.
It was funny.
Yeah.
Is there a Peacemaker series that spun out of that?
There was. I haven't watched it. I don't watch a lot of TV series. I mostly stick to movies. So I might watch it eventually. We'll see. But yeah, I don't know if it's good or not. I can't recommend it, or I can't. Whatever the opposite of recommend is.
I get that.
Disrecommend it either.
All right, so is it my turn now? Is that where we're at?
Yeah, this is your third pick.
Third pick. All right, so my third pick is going to be Watchmen, because I love Watchmen. I obviously tonally different, but I think it does some similar things that Batman has always done and DC Comics do well, which is ask these very big questions and kind of don't answer them necessarily, just kind of roll around with them. But I thought it was great. I thought put together really well. It's very distinct, but I liked it, and I just always think it's cool. I love Watchmen. So the whole line in that one where it's like, you don't understand. You're not. I'm not locked up in here with y'all. Y'all are all locked up in here with me with Rorschach. I love that so much.
Rorschach is awesome.
So yeah, man, love me some Watchmen.
Yeah. Have you've read the graphic novel?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
It is great.
By the way, which version have you seen? Other versions of Watchmen other than the theatrical? You know, they have like the really long director's cut and then the like extended cut. I can't remember which one I watched.
I've seen one that's beyond I think I've seen maybe not the super long one.
Yeah.
I think I've seen the extended one.
I think I feel like it's one of those super long one.
Really?
Yeah, it has those cartoon. The comic that's like the comic within the comic.
Within the comic. It's got some of that in there.
It's like animated, and I think that's the super long version that has the animated version of that, which I remember watching. So I think I watched the really long version of the movie.
That's kind of like I feel like anything like that when you're translating from and unlike comic books, like Watchmen's just so big and long comparatively. And it's like you gotta pick and choose because you just can't
Yeah.
fit everything in there.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah, there's a
okay, but
lot.
like that becomes a challenge of what you choose and what you don't choose. So yeah, Watchmen, man, I love it.
Yeah, great
Who watches
movie.
The Watchmen?
It's a fun movie. I think it gets a bad rap, but it's fun. It's fun. I like it. Okay, so there's a lot of good movies. There's some movies that
There are also some very bad movies. Let's just be honest.
some very bad
There,
movies.
there's some pretty terrible movies.
I think
in
it's
there as
safe to
well.
say Batman and Robin is probably not going to be picked in this.
You don't want bat nipples, man? Was that the one with bat nipples on the suits?
Yeah, I think Batman and Robin and Batman Forever both have the bat nips.
See, Batman Forever was not as bad, but
No,
Batman and
it
Robin
wasn't.
just doubled down on everything that was wrong.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You're not gonna choose Green Lantern?
I'm not. I'm not gonna choose Green Lantern, unfortunately.
I should choose that just to tick off my brother who loves Green Lantern so much,
and Ryan
particularly Guy
Reynolds,
Gardner.
Yeah, Ryan Reynolds ruined him. It wasn't his fault, I don't guess, but yeah. So I have other movies that I think I like more than this, technically, but I feel like we can't let too much more time go by without taking a Superman movie.
Yeah, I was wondering when that was going to happen.
I'm just going to go with the iconic 1978 Superman with Christopher Reeves.
Yeah,
which
it is iconic.
I actually caught up with this recently because I knew we were going to be doing this, and I was like, I have some movies blind spots that like I really need to watch. And I was actually surprised, like, this was very similar to Batman Begins in that, like, you don't see him as Superman until, like, halfway through the movie. There's a lot of, like, backstory and, like, you know, kind of character building that happens in this that I actually really enjoyed. I thought it was fun and interesting. You know, a lot of people don't like the hokey opening stuff on Krypton, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. Marlon Brando as Jor-El, his father. Gotta love it. But yeah, I mean, Christopher Reeves is Superman. And so like it's hard to pick any other Superman above that one. And yeah, I really enjoyed the movie. It's got some hokiness to it. It's got some like corniness to it. But I mean, for one, it was made in 1978, and you know, for two, like it's a comic book movie. It's a Superman movie, and yeah, I liked the duality of Christopher Reeves to his like dorky, like clumsy Clark Kent versus this like put together Superman. Really fun. All right, what you got?
All right, 4. I absolutely love Shazam.
Okay, yeah.
Not the sequel, the first one, 2019.
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation when I was working in Atlanta with a guy who was like a film guy, and we both were talking about how much we would love to see like a really good Captain Marvel. When I say Captain Marvel, I mean DC version, which is also known as Shazam.
Right.
And I just think it's so good. I think Zachary Levi kills it. I think it's got that fun, like, because of the dynamic of like being a kid that turns into a superhero. It's just got that fun element, particularly for DC sometimes, that gets lost in the dark, gritty real sometimes. I just loved it. It's great. I just think it's a great movie. And I just really enjoyed it.
I agree.
And I think when it came out, it really helped because it helped just feel fresh, and even though it's almost like an older take on it, but it was done well.
Yeah, I thought it was really well done. I don't have a whole lot of complaints about it. I mean, it's not the best movie in the world, but it was super fun and enjoyable. I think, I agree. Zachary Levi, really good in it. He kind of like carries the kid quality into the superhero. Yeah, and I even thought the kid that played Billy Batson, like the kid as the kid, is he does a pretty good job. I thought.
And I think I've not seen the newest one, but my gut tells me that they tried to do too much with too many people, and like not everyone can pull off that dynamic well. So that's what my gut says made it fall apart. But I don't know.
Yeah.
But I really love
Black
Shazam,
Adam?
man. I didn't, because again, like it's the same thing. Like
Yeah.
Black Adam does not intrigue me because it's the typical like dark gritty DC thing. Like literally, I think Captain Marvel and Shazam as a character in the DC universe is awesome because it's a kid that's sitting at the table with the Justice League, with Batman and Wonder Woman and Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter, and he's a kid. And I don't know. I mean, I know Batman knows he's a kid, but I don't know who else does. And he's kind of just like, yeah. And I just love that. I think it's great. And I feel like Black Adam is the complete opposite of that. It's just this tragic, angry guy who wants to kill a bunch of people. I imagine. I feel like that movie just got made because The Rock wanted it to be made.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, Shazam, it's a funny character. Originally was Captain Marvel, and then they kind of split off between the two, Marvel and DC, and he became Shazam. But yeah, really fun character. Yeah, he's great in is it Justice League Unlimited that he's in the series? He's in that.
I believe that's right.
I think so.
That's the newer animated Justice League one, right?
Yeah, there's like the like iconic Justice League series, and then after that was Justice League Unlimited, which expanded.
He's the one.
Yeah. Really fun.
He's also in one of my favorite comics, which is called Kingdom Come, which is really good.
Kingdom Come is fantastic.
It is.
And it has a unique art style too.
It does. I love the art in it. It's amazing. But like when he shows up to fight Superman, I love it so much.
It's great.
So anyways, that's where I started falling in love with him, and it's just never left. So I love Shazam.
Okay. I'm going to break the animated world, and I'm going to take another recent watch. As I was thinking about the animated movies are like easy to like throw on and watch because they're not very long, which I love. But
I would say they're almost consistently decent,
solid. They're usually solid because they usually don't stray too far from what the comic does, and so you're basically just watching the comic book animated. The ones that stand out are the ones that like are animated really well and have like really good voice acting. Which this one that I'm gonna pick has.
I'm wondering if you're gonna pick the one I think you're gonna pick.
I'm gonna go with Batman Under the Red Hood.
Oh, that's a very good one. That's not the one I thought you were gonna say.
It's so good.
Excellent.
If you're thinking of the other one, I hope you don't take it. But if you do, at least one of us gets it. I might get it later. But this one I just thought was, oh man, it's such a compelling story. It's emotional. I don't want to talk about it too much because it's best if you like don't know the story. I kind of knew it going in because I've read the comic story arc in the past, but man,
it's very good. And I feel like it was I think it came out in 2010, like somewhere after 2010. There.
Mm-hmm.
But ever since like then, like 2010 until like the last decade or so, roughly, DC animated stuff that they've been taking like well-loved comic books and doing them have just gotten so, like the animation's great, the voice acting's great. It's just, you can tell whoever's been doing that stuff it's been like, they really put a lot of love in it. It's just so good.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's I think become one of my favorite animated DC features. Yeah, that was my fourth pick. Where are you going to go with 5? We're going to draft 7 because there's a lot to choose from. A lot of good ones.
There's lots of good. Particularly if you're big geeks like me and Eli, and we know tons of DC movies. I'm going to do. I have a deep abiding, like my favorite. Like as much as I love Nolan's Batman, and as much as I love the new Batman and just Batman in general, like my love when I think of Batman, I think of the animated series. Like that is what I think about. So I'm going to go with Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which I think is one of the best Batman movies, period. Like it's so good.
It is.
If you've not watched it, it is the animated series cast. I mean, it's that art style and it's just a full length movie. It's so good.
Yeah.
Mark Hamill's in it as the Joker,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is amazing. He's amazing. Kevin Conrad's that's who I think about when I think of Batman's voice. I think about Kevin Conroy.
Mhm.
And so I just think it's a great story. The art's great. It's like formative in my childhood. It's just
Yeah.
it's so good.
Yeah. It is very good. It's got a good like little love story too, which
Yeah.
is fun to have. Good twist in the plot. Yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah. Was that the one you were thinking? You were hoping I wasn't going to take? Because that's what
No.
I was thinking when you said animated.
No, it wasn't. So, but
That's good.
I'm gonna go ahead and take it right now.
Well, then take what you're going to take.
This is possibly my favorite DC. Like, I'm a DC guy. I haven't read much Marvel or anything else. I've mostly read DC comics, and this is probably my favorite comic story, if not like in my top, few of my favorite stories. And I'm gonna go with Justice League: The Flashpoint Paradox.
I was wondering if you could hit that. You're a big
Yeah.
Flash guy.
Yeah, Flash is my favorite. He's my favorite character. I caught up with the Flash DCEU movie recently. It was fine.
Is it any good?
It's fine. It was a fun watch.
Because it's basically that story arc, right? Am I wrong about that, or a version of it?
It's they take the foundation of it and do something fairly different with it. It's
Okay.
It's like Flashpoint, but like not Flashpoint. It's just kind of the concept. But yeah, the Flashpoint story is like it's
excellent.
so freaking good.
It really is great.
I remember
Thomas Wayne and
I remember watching. I'm not watching. I remember reading the story in the graphic novel, and like I'm pretty sure I remember like tearing up just reading the comic because it gets like that emotionally resonant. And yeah, the animated version of it, it's a tiny bit different than the comic, but it doesn't stray from the story very much at all, and it's really well done, and it's just my favorite.
The voice acting is great, and the animation is great too. Like it is really done well.
Yeah, it's just my favorite. I think it's my favorite comic story, with my favorite comic book character at the center of it. So
it's just that sweet spot, man.
Yep.
All right, I'll tell you what my number 6 is going to be. I'm going to go back to live action. I really like Wonder Woman from 2017.
Wonder Woman's good.
I did not care for 1984 or whatever it was. I think.
Yeah.
I'll just be honest. I just really was surprised when I saw it in theaters. I also have a little girl now, and at the time, and so like again, I've never been like a huge Wonder Woman fan, but now I'm like Wonder Woman, and like we have a little DC comic book, and she loves Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was great. I think it was an excellent movie, really well done. I didn't think it tried to do too much, too little.
It had a good heart at the center.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, and so like it's kind of like Shazam in the same way. Like Shazam, the first movie, great. The second one just kind of stumbled a little bit. I don't know though, but like I just really loved the Wonder Woman movie. I thought it was great. So
yeah,
thought everything about it was good.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of my favorites. It was. If you didn't take it, I probably was going to take it in the next couple picks. But yeah, I agree.
Well, then
Wonder Woman.
What
84,
are you doing for yours then? Yeah, 84 was a little letdown.
Pedro Pascal was kind of fun as the villain. He was kind of wild and crazy, which was fun, but yeah, just not great. Yeah, I'm gonna go. You went Watchmen as your Alan Moore based comic story, so I'll go with another Alan Moore based story and go with V for Vendetta.
Oh my goodness! Remember.
Yeah, this at one point in my life, probably like early college, was probably like my favorite movie.
We before we had kids, me and my wife, every single November 5th watched it, and we still will, like if we remember, and if life has actually got time that day, we will stop and watch it because it is excellent.
It is. It's good. I always think about the V monologue that Hugo Weaving pulls off like masterfully. One of those things that would be so cheesy.
Yeah,
it is. if nothing else, like if you don't go watch this, like, just go find that clip on YouTube and watch it. It's so good.
100%. That's excellent.
Yeah, Natalie. Did you say Natalie Portman? Is that what you just said? I didn't hear what you said.
Nope.
Okay. Yeah, Natalie.
I don't know what I
Portman's in it.
said, Eli. I'll be honest. She's in it.
Yeah,
it's
she's
good.
She's good in it. Stephen Fry. I like Stephen Fry in it. He's good. I just like this movie. I feel like it's. I feel like a lot of people have kind of gone more sour on it. More recently, I don't really know why.
People just don't like to have fun, dude. I mean, it's not like
it's a fun movie.
It's fun and it's clever, and it's about a dude wearing a mask throwing knives around.
Yeah,
who's like superhuman. Like, just stop taking yourself so seriously.
Now, it is different than the comic story in ways. It's generally it's the same. It's the same story, but yeah, it takes some theatrical liberties, but still very good. So yeah, that was my 6th pick. This is your last pick.
Yeah, well, and I'm gonna go an animated one for this. One of probably my favorite Batman comic is Batman Hush, and they did an excellent animated version a few years back of it that I thought was great, and it's great. So if you've never watched Batman Hush or read Batman Hush, it's really excellent.
It's similar to Under the Red Hood in that you don't want to talk about it because you'll give away what's so great about it.
That's very, very well said. Yeah, there is some. It is funny because I feel like most of the really good Batman arcs have a similar vein in them of what we're talking about. Like there's like a turn and a twist of something you realize, and you can't talk about the story too much or you'll like give away the brilliance of it. But just trust me, Batman Hush is excellent. It is so good to read if you get a chance to read it. But I think the animated thing is excellent also. Like kind of what we've been talking about, some of these animated movies of the comic books are just so good. So Batman Hush, check it out. It's excellent. Art style's great. Nightwing's in it. My brother would love that because he loves Nightwing, and Superman shows up at one point. It's excellent. It's just really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I actually haven't seen the Hush movie, but I have read the graphic novel, and I love the story. It's a great story.
It's it's like Under the Red Hood. Like it's really great animation, really good. Cool. Definitely worth watching.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. So there's a lot of stuff still that I would love to take still out there. I really feel like this might just be like the chalk pick at this point in the draft, just because it's still there. But I really feel like we would be doing this draft injustice if the 89 Batman wasn't taken.
I thought about that. I almost did that. It's excellent.
Yeah.
I just like Hush better.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. I rewatched this recently with my wife, and it's a lot of fun. I don't know that it's as good as I remember it being in like my nostalgia watching it this time, especially like right around watching Batman Begins.
I get that.
But it's a really fun movie. And the Jack Nicholson Joker is pretty iconic, like that, the way 100%. He plays the character. So I don't know this. Yeah, it's just like we have to take this movie if we're going to do DC movies draft. So I've got to get it.
I agree. You got to take it. Yeah, man. I get it.
But yeah, that's it. That's the draft. Let me read off what before I do that, before I read off our final draft teams, were there any honorable mentions you had? I know you mentioned Lego Batman before we started.
I love Lego Batman.
Will Arnett.
I would. Yeah, it's just so good.
Yeah.
I love Lego Batman. I'm trying to think if there's any other ones. Let me look really quick.
Yeah, I'm kind of scrolling through. I think Man of Steel is underrated. I really like Man of Steel.
I would agree with that. I think Man of Steel is definitely. I liked Man of Steel a lot.
It has terrible ratings, and I just don't really understand. I thought it was good. Superman Returns, not very good.
Yeah.
sort of like in the similar vein of Green Lantern.
Talking about honorable,
I already mentioned The Flash. Did you ever see Birds of Prey?
I've seen clips and I've laughed, but I've not seen it. No.
Yeah. I don't think it's a fantastic movie. But I actually had a lot of fun with it. I actually would recommend like watching it. I think it was really fun. You have Ewan McGregor plays Black Mask in it.
I love Ewan McGregor.
And yeah, and he plays it like an expert live action comic book actor. It's so fun.
I just need to make sure I understand this right, because I just googled DC movies and National Treasure popped up. I feel like that's not a DC movie.
That's not right.
Just making sure.
No.
I was going to mention I've not seen the Joker, but I've heard excellent things about it. Or Joker.
Yeah.
Very different. But have you seen it?
I have. So I have a tainted view of the Joker because I saw it in theaters and it made me very uncomfortable. Which the movie is supposed to make you uncomfortable. Sure. And I think that works. But my issue was there were scenes in the movie where like the audience, it was a packed theater, where like the audience was like laughing, like a lot of the audience was laughing. And it made me uncomfortable because I'm watching it and I'm like, this is not funny.
Yeah.
Like, this is not supposed to be being played for jokes. Like, this is supposed to be like super like squirming your seat uncomfortable because the dude is psychotic. And like the audience, like a lot of the audience is like laughing.
Yeah, that would freak me out a little bit.
Yeah, it kind of tainted my view because I was like, what's going on in this movie that's not connecting with people? There's something. Like, it was working for me. Like, I was watching these scenes of, like, him doing these, like, brutal, like, psychotic things and, like, being really uncomfortable. So it was working for me personally, but it wasn't working for, like, the audience as a whole.
Yeah, I get that.
And so I was like, something's off about this. But I was positive on it. I thought it was a good movie.
I get that. I was going to say, an honorable mention, I saw Snyder's version of Justice League. I think it's good. I mean, it's definitely. I feel like
it's very long, but it's very good.
And again, it is very long, but it is very good. I think it's great. I feel like looking at Justice League, I really wish, because correct me if I'm wrong, but his kid passed away or something. There was like something tragic that happened. He had to step away, right?
Yeah.
So like obviously that film didn't go according to plan of what he was hoping, and so I'm glad we got to see at least some of what it looked like. But I know people like to slam on it. I don't think, obviously, I still think it has some issues, but I thought it was, pretty good.
Yeah, I think the long version of Zack Snyder's Justice League is good, and another one that I think that I like more than the general public was Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice.
I like that too.
I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was like fantastic or anything, but I was like, I'm glad I watched that. I had fun with that movie sort of thing. But I mean, obviously like Doomsday at the end is a huge, like, why did you do that sort of thing? But but yeah. Have you seen The Long Halloween Part 1 and Part 2?
It's really good.
Animated?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Long
really
Halloween.
Good. That's another one of my favorite stories.
Hush and The Long Halloween are right up there for like two of my favorite like comic stories.
Yeah.
This is the last, I guess, throw in there. It's not a movie, but it's an animated series. But I really liked Young Justice. I don't know if you've seen Young Justice.
I think I've seen a little bit of it.
So it's all about like the sidekicks, basically. But it's really good. It's like it's basically like Teen Titans without being ridiculous. It's really good.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, Young Justice. Yeah, I've seen some of it. Very good. Obviously, Teen Titans, more like comedic version of that. The Batman, you have the Batman animated series that's iconic that you kind of mentioned. Yeah, there's a lot of good series.
Yeah, there are a lot.
Batman Beyond, we mentioned that.
Batman Beyond.
Batman Beyond is so good. I'm trying to think. Oh, I actually did this for my recommendation of the week a couple of episodes ago. Have you watched any of My Adventures with Superman? It's it's a new
Oh,
series.
is that the
It's a
one that's
new
like
little
animated, like almost has like an anime
uh-huh.
Shogun vibe going on with it?
A little bit. It kind of it sort of feels like a mix of like the anime animation and like typical American animation. It doesn't feel like fully all in on
Yeah, but it
anime
definitely feels
to
like it's
me.
got a little bit of that in there.
Yeah, it's actually really good. I've watched like 6 or 7 of the 10. I think all 10 are out now. Of season 1. But yeah, it's actually really good.
I'll have to check that out.
I'm enjoying it.
I've
Yeah,
not, but sounds great. Yes, yeah,
yeah,
that's what I was thinking about it. Yeah, well, there you go. That's all I got.
yeah. Um, yep. So I'll read out our drafts as a whole. And then yeah, Drew took Batman Begins, The Batman, Watchmen, Shazam, Batman Mask of the Phantasm, Wonder Woman, and Batman Hush. Great list. My list is The Dark Knight, The Suicide Squad, Superman from 1978, Batman Under the Red Hood, Justice League, The Flashpoint Paradox, V for Vendetta, and the 1989 Batman with Michael Keaton. So, yeah.
Good list.
That's a really good list.
To be
of
honest,
movies.
we both win if you watch any of these movies.
We both win. If we get one person to watch one of these that they haven't watched before, then we win.
That's very true.
So that's kind of the goal with movie drafts, is to get people to watch movies they haven't watched before. So yeah, check some of these movies
Check
out.
them out.
Cool.
Yes.
Drew, do you have a recommendation of the week? I have not thought of anything. I'm about to think of something right now off the fly.
Good.
So feel free to do the same.
I will say that recommendation of the week, because I have a young child and a pregnant wife, and so we don't have a ton of time to watch TV, but we have been spending a little time. We have been watching the new Ahsoka series, and we love Star Wars, and me and my wife watched all the Clone Wars together, and then somehow I talked her into that, and then she was like willing to watch Rebels with me, and we really loved Rebels, and we really loved Chopper and Hera and Ezra and all these things. We just love all that stuff, and so Ahsoka, the live action, has just felt like it just feels like Rebels live action with Sabine and Ahsoka. We've only seen the first episode. It's really good. I mean, like Star Wars. So I mean, if you like Star Wars, great. If you don't, but I think it's good. It's worth watching, I think.
Cool. Yeah, I haven't checked it out yet. I probably will eventually. I haven't watched all of the new Star Wars series. I
will say The Mandalorian by
season
season 2 and then season 3 feels like it's Dave Filoni's continuation of what he's been going on in Clone Wars and Rebels. And this is just continuing on. So I'm excited to see where he's going with it. It's going to be interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't watched the 3rd season of Mandalorian yet either. But yeah, maybe I'll get to it.
It's all right.
I'm sure.
It's not as good as the first two. I'll agree with that. But it's still worth watching. There's some pretty cool stuff in there.
Yeah. So this is just fresh on my mind. I'm winging it. I didn't plan a recommendation of the week. So I'm going to recommend making some homemade burrito bowls.
Excellent choice.
That's what we had for dinner tonight, and it was delicious. I cut up sirloin into little bitty tiny cubes and threw some Mexican Fiesta seasoning on them and put them in a pan. And then after that, all you got to do is cook some rice, pull some beans out of a can, throw some guac and salsa in there, maybe cook some bell peppers. We actually put sweet potatoes in ours.
I'd go with that.
Yeah, put sweet potatoes in there. Cook you up a good homemade burrito bowl. Beats Chipotle every time. That's my off the cuff, winging it recommendation of the week, and that's all we have. Drew,
yes,
tell us where people can follow you. I know you have a podcast that you
Yes.
do. If you want to tell people about that, and then tell people where they can follow you personally too, if you want.
So I'm on Facebook as Drew Feltz and on Instagram as The Drew Feltz. Check me out there. I'm a college pastor, and so we do a podcast called 108 North, like my shirt I'm wearing. 108 North podcast. It is all about talking about what it means to follow Jesus and diving into that. We do a lot of books and read through those and talk about those, as well as talking about what it means to follow Jesus in everyday life. So check all that out. And if you happen to be in Statesboro for some random reason, come hang out with us. We have a great time downtown. We'll feed you some good food and tell you about Jesus, and we can talk about geeky stuff if you want to. Some of my leaders say that I'm never teaching unless I make a Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, or a comic book reference during teaching at some point, which almost always happens. So come hang out. We'd love to have you.
Cool. Yep. And I'll put all that in the show notes so you can just click those links. But yeah, it's been fun.
It has been fun.
That was fun Batman Begins conversation, fun movie draft, just all around a good time. But yeah, that's all we have for this week. So for Drew Feltz, I'm Eli Price, and you have been listening to the Establishing Shot podcast. We will see you. Thank you so much for joining us on the Establishing Shot today. We hope you enjoyed the episode and got a lot out of it. Make sure before you go to like and subscribe on all your podcast platforms, and especially on Spotify and Apple. If you could leave a rating and review, that would greatly help the visibility of the podcast, and I would greatly appreciate it. Again, if you go to establishingshotpod.com, you can find out all you need to know about the show, where to find us on the social media platforms, where to find us podcast-wise, YouTube, and you can even leave a voicemail there on the website on the right side of your screen. So click that if you want to give a comment or ask a question about the show. Just feel free to leave a voicemail. We'd be happy to feature that on the show. And also, if you just want to email rather than leave a voicemail, you can email us at establishingshotpod@gmail.com, and we would be happy to answer your question there or feature a question or comment on the show if it pertains to the episodes. So please do that, and we would love for you to join the Establishing Shot family. You can, again, find where to do that on the donate page at establishingshotpod.com. We hope you have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.
We were happy here. For a little while.
But look, I figure it this way. Better to be king for a night than schmuck for a lifetime.